Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our Wilmot Township Council meeting this evening. To start off, say, although recognized last week at the budget meeting, I would again like to acknowledge Black History Month. In Canada, celebrations honor the many achievements and contributions to Black Canadians. I would also like to take a moment and honor the anniversary of the Quebec mosque shooting and that occurred 4 years ago this past January. This horrific act of violence has no place in Canada, and our condolences to those who were directly affected by this. And I think we should take a moment to reflect on that. Thank you. I think we'll do the land acknowledgement. Councillor Gordick, please. Go ahead, Councillor Gordick. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry about that, people.
No problem.
We acknowledge with gratitude as we gather virtually that Wilmot Township is located on the traditional territory of the neutral Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Mississauga peoples. We also want to acknowledge the importance of the District 1 Stern Covenant, a peace agreement made between Indigenous nations before the settlers arrived. It characterizes our collective responsibility to each other and Mother Earth. We should only take what we need, leave enough for others, and keep the dish clean. By acknowledging this covenant, and the First Nations Métis peoples, we are reminded of our important connection to this land where we live, learn, and work together as a community, and we continue down the path together in reconciliation.
Hey, thank you. Are there any additions to the agenda tonight? Seeing none, is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? Seeing none, I have one, and it's conflict with item 11.3.3 for a possible recommendation of the report. So the first item is the minutes of the Monday, January 11th meeting. The recommendation of the minutes of the following meeting be adopted as presented. Council meeting January 11th, 2021. Have a mover and a seconder for that. Moved by Councillor Fenning, second by Councillor Fisher. Are there any comments, questions, omissions, corrections? Councillor Hallman.
Thank you. Through the mayor, I just have a question for, I believe, the clerk. Is it possible when we get the agendas to add the page numbers beside the actual report number, either after the meeting or before the meeting? I know sometimes that can change maybe after the meeting. I just wanted to ask you about that.
Through you, Mayor Armstrong. I'm sorry, you want the page numbers added to the minutes or the agenda? I'm sorry.
Sorry. So for example, there you go, like where it says like DS 2021-03, if we can beside that or somewhere along there indicate what page number it is in the rest of the agenda package. So I'm not sure, because I know sometimes it changes after the fact. If it can be done when we approve it after, or even beforehand, if that's not too much trouble.
So certainly that's something that we can look at. There are times when we are putting the council agenda out where we are in a time crunch, and so it's very difficult to do it within that time. So it's something that we can look at how operationally we can make that happen and still meet our timelines and not be getting it out at 8 o'clock at night. But certainly it's something that we can take a look at how we can accomplish that.
Thank you. With that in mind, that's why I suggested, so maybe even if it's after that, for going back for reference, that might help for historical looking up. That's all.
Okay.
But thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Seeing none. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. So the next item is a public meeting. This is a public meeting in respect of zone change application 01-21. We will hear all interested people who wish to speak on this matter. If the decision of council is appealed to the local planning appeal tribunal, the tribunal has the power to dismiss an appeal if you do not speak at the public meeting or make written submission before the bylaw is passed. I now declare the public meeting open. Persons attending it as delegations at this meeting are required to leave their names and addresses, which will become part of the public record. And you are hereby advised that this information may be posted on the township's official website along with your email addresses if provided. Mr. Martin.
Thank you, Mayor Armstrong. This zone change application deals with a property at the top end of Brubaker Street in Baden. The property was subject to a previous zoning application in 2015, wherein a 12-unit townhome development was approved. And subsequently, this property was severed from a larger parcel that it formerly was part of in 2016. This application, now having looked at the engineering in more detail, looks at intensifying the number of dwelling units to make them more affordable and also to achieve the price point necessary to service the properties. So the development applies the same footprint or same property limits as the previous zoning application. At this time, they have provided a proposal that would include transfer of lands to the township, which would provide the opportunity for rear access and additional parking space. That is a concept and certainly provides the opportunity that this sort of density could be achieved on the property. Other options may be available for them to look at as well that would not provide the same density. But this is the proposal before us. The zoning application applies to the current limits of the property only and not those lands that would potentially be transferred to the township at a future time. The application deals with some site-specific amendments dealing with property line setbacks and also parking requirements. Through the circulation of the application, there were no comments or concerns raised at the time of writing this report, and to date, comments from the Region of Waterloo remain outstanding, primarily their review of the noise and vibration analysis related to this development. And there are also some outstanding comments that need to be addressed from the Grand River Conservation Authority, and just confirmation of servicing capacity within the infrastructure in the roads. When all of those matters have been addressed, staff would return to council with a more detailed report and recommendation. It's my understanding that the applicant and the consultant are also here to speak to this application as well.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. Are there any questions of a technical nature? Councillor Fenning.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Armstrong. Just looking at this proposed site plan, and obviously not knowing exactly what all of the parts of the drawing are, I noticed that it's awfully close to the railway required setback. Can you explain a little bit about that, perhaps? And also want to say that, you know, densification is something that we need to see, and adding units like this, we certainly are pleased to see the creativity in making this application.
Through Mayor Armstrong to Councillor Fenning. The the 30-meter setback that's shown on the drawing is the minimum requirement of CN to the habitable space of a building. So they've created and altered the design of the structures such that they can meet that setback requirement. The previous proposal had longer driveways, so the units that were previously approved on this property, the 12 units, were further back. They were out a little bit further from that 30-meter setback than the one corner unit. But the majority of the units, certainly in this development, are well past the minimum 30 meters. The noise and vibration analysis currently under review will ensure that any mitigation measures required in terms of brick veneer structures or thicker panes of glass, typical mitigation requirements would be included in this development if that's necessary. The final review and comments on that report are outstanding from the region at this point.
Thank you. Mr. Fisher?
Yes, through you, Mayor Armstrong. So is the reason that the township's getting conveyed land, is it because it's the road that goes by there, or what's the reasoning there? And secondly, what size of development would require to have a water retention pond? Just out of curiosity.
Mr. Martin?
Yeah, through Armstrong to Councillor Fisher. So the proposal that's attached to this report, the lands that would be donated to the township facilitate back-to-back units. So it provides a rear entrance, and so the lands are necessary to provide the proper access and also a portion of the visitor parking. When the land was severed in 2016, the property line was created based on the proposed development limit at the time. Since that time, there have been, the township completed the rationalization exercise, and so the urban boundary of Baden was tied around the limits of that property. So it provides less opportunity to interpret zoning boundaries, which typically zoning and official plan boundaries are usually have some room for interpretation with respect to property lines, depending on the scale of the map. In this instance, it was created very tightly around the property line, and if the severance hadn't preceded this development, we wouldn't really be having the discussion we are right now. But because the property line was established before this proposal, that's where we have looked at some options to be creative in how this sort of density can be achieved on the property while also providing necessary access and parking. The second part of your question with respect to the stormwater management facility, I don't know if there's perhaps Mr. Mullenhouse might have a better answer than that from an engineering standpoint, but essentially that comes through the detailed engineering review. So there's certain options when controls are in place for parking structures, if there are opportunities for existing municipal infrastructure, looking at legal outlets for stormwater management, all those sort of things have to be looked at. I don't know if there's actually a minimum number that would start with, but it comes through the overall design of that structure and seeing what infrastructure is available to deal with stormwater. I don't know if that answers your question or not, but if there's more details on that, perhaps we could direct those to Mr. Mullenhouse.
Okay, and one other thing too, I definitely think we need this type of buildings in Baden, certainly a need for it. And is it probably a little early to tell, but are they going to be for sale or rental units?
Through Mayor Armstrong to Councillor Fisher, I think the applicant or consultant is prepared to make an additional presentation. They may speak to that from a zoning perspective. The tenancy, whether it be ownership or rental, doesn't form part of that consideration. The current proposal doesn't include those specifics, but certainly perhaps in their presentation, the consultant may have more information to share on that.
Okay, thank you. I see no further questions. We will now hear from delegations. And before commencing, I would like to remind all delegations of some guidelines for participation. Delegations will be allotted 10 minutes to speak and will be provided a 2-minute warning reminder when your 10 minutes is nearing completion. We also ask that you leave the meeting once your issue has been addressed. You are then welcome to watch the remainder of the meeting being webcast live via YouTube. If you conduct yourself in any of the following manners, it will result in an immediate muting and removal from the meeting. Interrupting counselors, staff, or other delegations, derogatory statements about counselors, staff, or others, hate speech or defamatory comments. I will now call upon the delegations. And the first delegation is Caitlin Port. Is Caitlin waiting? Ah, there we are.
Hello.
Welcome, Caitlin.
Thank you. I'm on rural internet as well, so sometimes it's just a little bit slow.
Well, we're quite familiar with that.
Yes, I'm in Wellesley, so I'm your neighbor. Good evening, Mayor Armstrong, members of council and staff. My name is Caitlin, and I'm an associate with MHBC Planning here tonight on behalf of Lab Development, and I'm joined, I believe, by Louis Veenstra and Rebecca Huffman, hopefully, if their internet allows, who are part of the Lab Development team. And I'm just going to hopefully keep my presentation brief, just add a little bit more information onto Mr. Martin's presentation, and then I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. And I do have a presentation. Excellent. Next slide, please. So it's a rather small property that we're looking at tonight. It's about 0.3 hectares, and as Mr. Martin mentioned, it was severed, I believe, in 2013 from the larger property to the south and to the east. It's that larger forested property with the natural heritage features on it. And then it was rezoned by the previous owner in 2015, and the intent at that time was to build a 20-unit street-facing townhouse development. Law of Developments purchased the property in 2018. Right now, that property is vacant. You can see in the bottom picture there on the right-hand side. It's grassy and meadow, and it's got some scrubby trees on it, and then also currently a basketball net looks like that the neighbors are using it. Surrounding land uses include low and medium density residential uses to the west and to the south and a little bit to the north. As mentioned, the CN rail line is also quite close. It's located to the north. And then there's wetland and forest features located to the south of the property. And as was mentioned in the previous presentation, currently the property is not serviced with municipal water and sewer services. So an extension from Schneider's Road to this development will be required for servicing. Next slide, please. The proposal before you tonight for the zoning bylaw amendment is to increase the density of the property from a 12-unit townhouse development to a 22-unit back-to-back townhouse development. And as mentioned, this property is very constrained. It's not a large property, so we've tried to come up with a creative solution that will make this project for residential development in Baden economically feasible for Law of Developments. The zoning bylaw amendment will permit the requested number of dwelling units, reduce the off-street parking requirements, and then as Mr. Martin mentioned, there's a number of site-specific zoning provisions as well, primarily related to reducing setbacks. And then, as also previously discussed, we're looking at approximately 0.1 hectares of the adjacent property being conveyed to the township for open space purposes. Next slide, please. So with the zoning bylaw amendment, there were a number of technical studies that were done back in 2015 with the original rezoning. And so we've actually updated a number of those studies to recognize the increased density. So we did do an updated noise and vibration study, and that is primarily looking at and addressing some of the concerns related to the adjacent CN railway to the north. So that report did recommend some upgraded glazing requirements for windows, some brick veneer exteriors, the use of central air conditioning, as well as warning clauses, and that's all related to CN. And we do expect at some point, as this development progresses through to the site plan application stage, that some form of development agreement with CN will also be required. Because of the environmental features located to the south, we also updated the environmental impact assessment. So just similarly to the previous development, we're making sure to stay well outside of the wetland, and there's a wetland buffer as well. There's we went through quite a few different versions of the concept plan to make sure that we're staying outside of the development, outside of the floodplain, pardon me. Any of the portions of the property that are currently disturbed and won't be developed, we will be looking at planting those areas and revegetating them. There will be some fencing installed to separate the environmental features from the residential units. And then the environmental impact assessment also recommended that residents be provided with environmental guide and brochure, which is pretty standard for developments that are located adjacent to environmental features. Next slide, please. So this is just, it's a little bit blurry on the screen, but this is the concept plan that we have submitted with the zoning bylaw amendment application. You can see that thick black line at the top is that 30-meter railway setback. So it goes right to the edge of the very, oh, thank you. Yeah, right to the edge of that corner unit there. We're also proposing that each unit has its own garage, so there will be a parking space available within the garage. But in addition, each driveway also has a parking space. And then we've also provided some additional visitor parking spaces on the east side of the property as well. It's a little bit hard to see on this concept plan, but the south portion of the roadway does include a walkway, and that walkway would be located in the lands that would be conveyed to the township with the purposes of providing the public with access. I just have to move our window over a little bit. We have provided some preliminary building elevations just to give you an idea of the scale of this type of a development. This is a local builder. They build a very high quality product. If you drive around Baden, you'll see some of their other developments. So they're looking to do something that's going to work well on this property and be very cohesive with the other developments in this area. Next slide, please. So as some of you have already noted, this is a new type of development for Baden, and actually for the township, I believe. It's back-to-back townhouses. So we are looking to introduce this new type of housing to Baden, which will provide another type of housing choice. This is an extremely constrained property with the CN railway to the north and the environmental features to the south and to the east, and just the size of the existing property. So we did our best to be creative, and we've gone through a few renditions of the concept plan with township staff, and this is what we've landed on for now. What we're proposing before you tonight is consistent with the PPS. It conforms with the growth plan and also conforms with the regional and the township official plans. And as I mentioned, we've updated our technical studies, and those technical considerations have been incorporated into the concept plan. They'll be further incorporated through site plan approval. to make sure that all the environmental and noise concerns are mitigated and addressed. And it's my opinion that this development represents good planning for the community of Baden, the Township of Wilmot, and also the region of Waterloo. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have or direct those questions to either Rebecca or Louis if hopefully they've been able to join us this evening. Thank you.
Any comments or questions for Caitlin? Seeing none. Very good. Thank you, Caitlin. Okay. So is there anyone present who wishes to address council on this matter? I'm not seeing or hearing anything, so that's good. Very good. So I'll now call the public meeting to a close, and we will continue on. There is a recommendation to council that the report DS 2021 be received for information. And do we have approximate timeline as to when it will be coming back, Mr. Martin?
At this point, until we have comments from the region, I can't hazard a guess.
Okay, very good. Thank you. So that recommendation is moved by Councillor Gordick, Councillor Fenning. All in favor? Thank you. That is carried. Next item is another zone change. This is a public meeting in respect of the zone change application 0221. We will hear all interested people who wish to speak on this matter. If the decision of council is appealed to the local planning appeal tribunal, the tribunal has the power to dismiss an appeal if you do not speak at the public meeting or make written submission before the bylaw is passed. I now declare the public meeting open. Persons attending as delegations at this meeting are required to leave their names and addresses, which will become part of the public record. And you are hereby advised that this information may be posted on the township's official website along with your email address, if provided. Mr. Martin.
Thank you, Armstrong. This zone change application deals with the property 49 Foundry Street in Baden. The application proposes to change the zoning from its current residential zone to Zone 5 commercial. The designation in the official plan is urban core, which allows for a mix of commercial and residential uses. The specific proposal on this property is to convert the existing home into office spaces. Certainly the commercial zoning would allow for other commercial uses as well, but that is the proposal that was submitted along with this application. In support of the application, the applicant provided a preliminary layout for parking to show that they can achieve the minimum requirements of the bylaw. Preliminary lot grading and drainage plan was provided to demonstrate that it was feasible to be constructed. And should the zoning be approved, the next stage through site plan control would be a detailed engineering review from both the township and the region of Waterloo to ensure that the parking lot is created appropriately. No comments or concerns were raised through circulation of the application, and staff recommend approval.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. council have any questions of a technical nature? Seeing none. Thank you. Okay, and just before we entertain any of the delegations, just a reminder of the guidelines that were spoken of earlier. And we have one registered delegation, that's Mr. John Lambert.
Through you, Mayor Armstrong. I believe Mr. Lambert is here to answer questions of council, if there are any. I don't know that he was prepared to make a presentation. However, if he does wish to say a few words, now would be the time if he does wish.
Evening, John. If you wish to address council, let us know. If not, that's fine too. Okay, not hearing from John at all. Are there any questions from council? Okay, then I'll officially call the public meeting closed and I'll read the recommendation. Recommendation that council approve zone change application 02/21 made by John Lambert, lot 39 and part lot of lots 40 and 41, plan 627 to change the zoning of the subject property from zone 3 residential to zone 5 commercial and to allow for required off-street parking to be provided within the front yard. That is moved by Councillor Fisher, Councillor Hallman. There's no further comments or questions. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. And the next item is the branding review. Who's going to speak? Ms. Middleholtz.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Armstrong. On behalf of the communications specialist, Ms. Baird, and the manager of information and legislative services, Ms. Murray, I'm happy to present the final recommended direction for the township's branding review. We've enjoyed working on this project and hearing the feedback from the public. I want to thank everyone who took part in this project and got us to this point. My report highlighted the process undertaken, but I am sure anyone who is tuning in this evening for this report is not here to listen to me describe the process. At this time, I would like to introduce Matthew Obby, the creative director for Obs and Mug, Inc. Mr. Obby and his team guided the municipality through this creative journey. The project team enjoyed working through this process with them and discovering the meaning behind their directions. The final recommendation being presented this evening has been endorsed by the senior management team. I would now like to ask Mr. Obby to present the final recommendations.
Welcome, Matt. You're still muted, sir.
It's 2021. I'm
All right.
sorry.
Hey, that's okay. We're all dealing with that kind of stuff.
13 months later. Sorry. Sorry. Thank you, Mayor Armstrong. And one more 2021 question. Sorry, do I share my screen or will the presentation? Perfect. Okay. All right. So thanks everyone for having me and giving me some time to walk through this. I'm always happy and excited to talk about sort of the behind the scenes of how work like this comes to be, and give the perspective from myself and our studio on how we ended where we ended. So if you go to the next slide, please. I won't go through every slide in this document. You can go to the next slide as well. That's just a quick note acknowledging that you know, we're not, no one's doing work right now in an ordinary time, and just acknowledging that we appreciate the input from everybody who was able to participate in the project in a time that was, you know, different than usual. So let's just go to the first section, the research. So the next slide, please. And then one more slide. So just a quick background on how this project came to be and how we sort of facilitated it. We approach every project that we do with the understanding that as a branding and design studio, our expertise is in that. It's in the branding and the design. It's in the craftsmanship of the actual graphic design. It's in the writing of the messaging and the organizations of all the ideas. What we're not the experts on is the township, is the business climate, the community, the tourism approach, all the different aspects that make Wilmot Wilmot. And so what we do is we really lean in for the first, say 80% of the project, and just listening and collecting as much information as possible. And that's really what this project followed. We spoke to a number of citizens, staff, the project team, some outside references, Kelly Curley, you'll see there. Just to get to listen and to hear, again, what makes Wilmot Wilmot. There isn't anything very technical about this kind of work. A lot of it is somewhat subjective. Our job is to take all of that subjectivity and try to put it into something that everyone can understand the perspective and understand the direction that it's headed. If you go to the next slide, to give you a sense of that, through the work we did, through the digital outreach and the one-on-one conversations, we had just over 500 responses, 500 pieces of information that all were surrounded this idea of what makes Wilmot Wilmot to you. Some of that was very open-ended questions. Some of it was more specific. Some was in response to some work that we put out. But all of it came in with the purpose of us collecting it, organizing it, finding those themes, finding those stories within all of it that seem to tie all the narratives together, looking for outliers and trying to understand why those outliers were there. And in the end, trying to form what really is a proper representation of the township in its best light, in a way that has an optimistic purpose, right? We are branding the township, and the point of that is to try and communicate who the township is looking to be, what it represents, and something that people can feel comfortable with. So if you go to the next slide, all of that research, where we think it's the most important and where we like to really focus our thinking at the beginning of the project is in what we call brand narratives. These are the stories, these are the narratives that help to define Wilmot, help to define the place based solely on what we heard and what we saw from all of the research that we did. The reason we do these is very purposely to take away any bias or any sort of preconceived ideas that we have coming into the project, and really set a groundwork and a framework for us to really develop something that represents the township properly. So these I'll explain for you because I feel they're critical to understanding the overall vision of the final piece. So if you want to go to the next slide, and the next slide, please. So the first brand narrative is this idea of our common ground. All of the feedback that we received, all of the input that we received, there was this one constant in it, and that was that the people of Wilmot, what was always appreciated was the actual place, the tangible, visible place of Wilmot. So as you drive in from, if you're coming from outside of the township, or as you're leaving the township, or you're navigating throughout it, it's the actual qualities of the fields, right, of the Nith River, of just the idea that the sky sort of goes on forever. That really tangible, natural spirit of the place was something that there was a real consistency around. So this concept of common ground in that literal sense is what is the commonality of people's perspectives we found was a really important narrative that we wanted to capture. Next slide, please. The next is this idea of our cherished community. And really what this narrative represents is the idea that whether, and I'll be completely transparent, we always receive feedback that's not always the most positive about the township, but there's always a tint to it about wanting their place to be as great as it can be. And so our cherished community is really around this idea that people are always working hard to improve, to care for, to protect, to foster a place that has that is a place that they love to be as a family, a place that they love to call home, and a place where they can build relationships. So there's this real sense of care and cherish, this sort of focus on being a cherished community that we found. Next slide, please. And the last principle, and this one I think is one that makes Wilmot so unique and really powerful, is this concept of a balanced rhythm. It's the idea that there are people who are in Wilmot because of how calm and because of how peaceful it is. You can almost call it an escape from, you know, the ruckus of the big city, or it has a sort of quaint feeling to it depending where you are. There's also people in Wilmot who are there because they want to, they're in the tech startups, they're in the fast-paced moving world that really surrounds Wilmot. And so there's a sense of different rhythms happening, right? There's this really young, active spirit. There's this really relaxed, established mindset as well. And so when you take both of those, there's this fantastic balance in Wilmot that we want to capture and sort of put in place. And when you think about that, you can take sort of the energy of New York City, and you would expect their identity to just be sort of jacked up all the time, really, really energetic. Or you can take the identity of somewhere that's maybe just solely rural, and you expect to be very quaint and very tidy. We want to find some sort of middle ground there to not misrepresent, but to be more authentic to Wilmot. So with those in mind, if you want to go to the next slide, the identity that we developed, and let's just jump to the next slide. And here we'll see the logo iteration of it. So for the Township of Wilmot, what's come out of this cycle here is, on the left-hand side, the icon, the sort of abstracted W, is intended to represent all of those things that we just talked about. And one thing I'll put on the table here, we never expect a logo to tell an entire story, right? A logo is meant to be either the period at the end of a conversation, or it's the hello at the beginning of a conversation, but it's not the conversation itself. So it should just support how you as a township are presenting yourselves. And so what we have here, this symbol, represents that the common ground. It represents the Nith River. It represents the rolling field. It represents the rising sun. And actually, if you go to the next few slides, you'll see how that's outlined. Let's jump to the next one, please. Yeah. So each of the different pieces, the components of that W, make up that landscape. They make up that scenery in a mark that has some movement, has some balance, and has sort of this care given to how it was drawn to really represent those brand narratives that we spoke about. If we go to the next slide. Solely from a utilitarian perspective, a good sort of timeless brand obviously needs to exist in a number of fashions, one of them being one color. So we just want to show that it does work well in one color. You lose a little bit of that story, of course, because color always tells stories. But from an integrity component, everything stays intact. If you go to the next slide, one more after this. And then surrounding the logo itself, we start to branch out and look at all the different pieces and components of the identity, one of them being that color. Really important to us, playing off that common ground, was that the colors that we chose did come from the place itself. So in the mark, you know, we have field green, nith blue, harvest gold. And then there's this fourth accent color that's not in the mark itself, but is in the broader brand identity, which is the sort of deep magenta. And that's pulled from that sort of iconic architecture that you see throughout the township. And if we go to the next slide, typography. Again, the typography is chosen, one, to work nicely with the icon, but also it has this typeface Astoria. It has this sense of being crafted by hand with the different sort of details to it, but still staying very modern, right? It's still a very, there's a lot of modernity in the way that it's drawn and the way that it's cut, but with some of the details, the little cuts on the end, little cuts on the S's, it does feel like it might have been carved in wood at some point, or just had this human touch to it, which is really important that we found that human, we didn't go too ultra modern, and we kept that humanity in the typography. And if you go on to the next slide, please. Just showing how this can really expand and blow out into a full-fledged brand identity. So you're really set up to communicate in many different ways. One of those, for example, is having a brand pattern, where when there's opportunities, whether it's environmental or digital, you have the ability to really impact an entire space just by putting on a very subtle pattern of the mark. We go to the next slide. We've also developed a range of pictograms representing the different places within the township. One sort of question that we wanted to make sure we answered early on in this project was whether or not, like many places you'll see, the logo is often a piece of architecture that represents the place. Here, we are very aware that Wilmot is not one place, but it's a collection of many places. It's a tapestry of different communities. And so we thought it was inappropriate to have one place represent the entire township. But as a supporting cast, we have pictograms of different areas within the township to be used on different branded materials. If we scroll to the next slide. And again, thinking about this in a bigger way than just being a logo, the mark itself can start to be interactive and really sort of leverage that concept of being a landscape and actually use imagery from the township to start to tell the stories of what's happening here. One thing that we heard really prominently was this idea that Wilmot is family, right? It represents a place that you call home with your family. We want to make sure that there's a way that the township can communicate that with keeping the brand visible in some way. And if you go to the next slide, please. And then, sorry, the next slide as well. So really important here as well is that the township already has something of an identity portfolio that we need to organize to make sure that we're using this brand efficiently and not creating too many redundancies within the township. So what you see here are the three primary marks that people who are experiencing Wilmot will experience. The first, of course, is the one we're talking about tonight. That's the corporate identity. Very specifically, this is reserved for use by the corporation. So one way to think about it is that when the township is doing something as a corporation, as a business, as an entity, the mark that we're talking about tonight is the mark they would use. The township coat of arms, that is now reserved for what it's properly meant to be used for. That's for the mayor and the township council to communicate mayoral and council communications. Right, we want to make sure that there's that differentiation when something goes out from the corporation and something that's coming out from either the mayor or the town council. And then finally, this sort of rogue symbol that is maybe the most important thing to deal with for its confusion is what's on the rec complex, and that's the symbol that what we are recommending is reserved for recreational initiatives. The reason for that is because that's what it means to the township today. Right? It's on the place where recreation happens. It's on the trails where recreation happens. And so you have this really great, unique opportunity to give it that sandbox and let it be that. And the corporate identity, speak for the corporation, and the township coat of arms, speak for the township. Next slide, please. And we can just flip through these really quickly. basically what we're showing here are a number of ways that this brand could be used on potential applications. So if you go to the next slide. So for example, light post banners to create a sense of placemaking, right? We want something that is very quick, very immediate, something you don't need to study to understand, but when you see it, you identify Wilmot right away. Things like strategic plans or other publications that go out, we wanted to find a way to make sure that there was some sort of flair, some sort of identity to them, without feeling overly designed or overly difficult to work with, understanding, the township's resourcing for creating these types of materials. We wanted it to be fairly plug and play without being too, without losing the energy that the mark has. Things like social posts, right? Just a way to take what would typically maybe be stock imagery or throwaway photography and infusing the brand in it with some way to get a little bit more identity, a little bit more of an official feel. And then things like vehicles, right? Opportunities to really make sure that when you see township vehicles or township, any sort of township merchandise or vehicles that's meant to be official, it's quickly identifiable. And if you go to the next slide. And it's just lastly, we put this one in here to show that there are going to be instances when this mark needs to be used quick and dirty. And so even when it's just stamped on a wood box to show that it's property of the township, its integrity still holds up. So just very lastly, arriving at a recommendation. This is maybe one of the most commonly asked questions around how we get to this point. And there's three things that we really think about. If you go to the next slide, I'll speak to those. The first is all that public feedback. So of course, throughout the process, we put options out to the public for their feedback, for their perspectives. We took those in. I'll say again, full transparency, we do not look at this as the one with the most votes is the one that gets chosen, because there are other things that need to be considered, of course, that we can't capture in a survey like that. For that reason, we also have project team input. So listening to the township staff, the people who will be using the brand for the next while, understanding what the real use cases are and how it needs to shape and how it needs to tell the stories it needs to tell. And then finally, brand principles. And this is where we take our specialty and our strong understanding of brand and design and apply our thinking to it. And brand principles are these ideas that come from those narratives that allow us to create something graphically from a design perspective that communicates those narratives we talked about earlier. And so just to close, I'll read off those brand principles for you to get a sense of where our minds were as we were designing this. So just go to the last slide. Right, so number one, authentic. Everything about this, we want to feel like it was either inspired by or came from the place. So if you think about the colors that we chose, the typography, all of it very purposefully has this sense of being real and genuine and from the place. Number two, the sense of connected. We wanted all the elements of this brand to feel like it was one cohesive brand story that was being told. Number three, craft. Again, going back to the idea of a cherished community, this is a place that people are taking care of and looking after. So everything about this brand should share that sense of craft and that sense of craftsmanship. Timelessness, we always say that timelessness takes time. So I understand the incredibly difficulty of sort of judging a brand in its inception, but it's important that whatever this brand, how it came out, it's able to stand the test of time, not be riding any trends that you might think about right now. Number five, adaptable. Because you are situated in a place where there is a rural culture, you are right next to one of Canada's most vibrant tech scenes. This brand could show up at a farmer's market. It could show up at a international technology conference. We want to make sure that if it's in either of those cases, it doesn't feel like it's out of place. Then lastly, rhythmic. And that's to make sure that this brand feels like it has a little bit of movement, it has that motion to it that is clearly found in Wilmot, and doesn't feel static, right? We don't want to play up any potential stereotypes or negative ideas of what the township might be. It is a place of movement, it's a place of progression, and it's a place of activity. So the mark should reflect that as well. And so with that, I'll pass it back. Oh, sorry, I should speak to next steps. So if this moves through, what we'll be developing is a very, and so you can go to the next slide, is just a very robust guideline document, really outlining exactly how to use all of these elements, how to use the typography, how to use this brand in collaboration with the other identity portfolio pieces like the coat of arms, how to speak in a way that tells the brand narratives, and then just sharing some use cases on how to actually implement this if you are to be making any sort of placemaking pieces. The guideline document will just outline exactly how to do that. And so with that, I'll pass it back. Thanks very much.
Ms. Middleholtz, you want to?
Thank you, Mayor Armstrong. I didn't have anything to add at this point. However, if any members of council have questions that either myself, my team, or Mr. Aubie can answer, we're more than happy to do so.
Councillor Hallman.
Thank you. Through the mayor. It was April of 2019 when I first brought my motion about branding. So it's so exciting to see this come to fruition. Thank you to SMT. Thank you to Matt and his team. This is by far, it's so exciting to see this come to life. Matt, I love how you captured our community. It was really great to hear someone who doesn't live here speak to the heart of what Wilmot really is to everyone who lives here. So thank you for capturing that. It also means so much to me to see that you chatted with Mr. Curley. That's, I'm not sure if it was staff and you, but thank you to all of you for that. That's amazing. And I deeply appreciate and value that interaction with Mr. Curley. So thank you for that piece, Matt. I do have a question. I don't know if it's to the clerk or to the fire chief, just wondering about the fire department, if they'll be using this at all in any way.
Ms. Middleholtz.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Armstrong. So with part of this conversation and this document that Odds and Mugs is going to be preparing, there are a few other marks that we have, which also include, of course, Castle Kilbride, Heritage Wilmot. So there are other documents at play. The one marks that are in play, the ones that are most prominent are the ones that he was talking about. As far as corporate, Castle Kilbride has always had its very unique identity unto its own, and people generally speaking don't confuse that. That's probably why it wasn't included. As for the fire department, that is still going to stay within the fire department, and it will depend on what it is that they're doing as to which is the more appropriate mark that they're going to be using, but that will also be addressed in the document.
Okay, thank you. I'm also a huge fan of the pictograms. It was really great to see that, and it was, I want to do backflips for that. It's just amazing to see our community represented that way, and it's so engaging. I love how the capturing of, as you said, something you can see at a farmer's market to a tech conference, that is Wilmot, what it is today. The only other thing I made a note about, as my computer goes dark on my notes screen, sorry. Was for Mr. Kelly. Just wondering about what's the next step financially for committing to this? Do you have any comments on what that looks like for us in Wilmot next?
Sure. I'll speak to it. Yeah, I'll speak to it a bit and probably hand it over to Ms. Middleholtz. So we do have, as the report outlines, there is some funding remaining within the original capital project for part of the implementation, as well as the update of the township website. We do look to the 10-year capital forecast. You'll see that there's dollars allocated over future years. It's not something that we can rebrand the whole township in one foul swoop. It's quite the expense, but we're looking to stage the implementation with the most critical areas, I would say, first, and I'd call them the low-hanging fruit or the quick wins, and then work our way out from there. But obviously, there will be some capital expenditures in the future with regards to signage and the like. But maybe Ms. Middleholtz, you could carry on that a little bit.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. So, of course, Mr. Kelly has his accounting way of saying it. I have my other way of saying it. But yes, in 2021, the branding rollout is more about replacing, where appropriate, the coat of arms on township assets, stationery, our online presence, documents going forward. this smaller initial rollout is largely about the cost containment, as Mr. Kelly said. And then depending on budget capacity for 2022 and forward, we would look out other rollout options beyond just the replacements. So.
Okay, thank you. And before I go away, I'm just going to say again, I love the repeating pattern, really creative and great. I'm really excited to hopefully see this go through in Wilmot tonight.
Thank you. Councillor Fanning.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Armstrong. I echo the thanks. You've done a great job of capturing what really is the essence of our community. And I love the result. I look forward to seeing the rest of the recommendations and work. And Mr. Kelly, so does that mean we're not going to be seeing a budget item for repainting of all the vehicles?
Not at this point in time, I'll say, but stay tuned on that.
I think we have to save up for the brushes. Councillor Gerber.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mayor Armstrong, to the clerk and her team, and also to Matt. Thanks so much for all your work on this. I mean, I love the documents when we saw it. I loved, Matt, your sort of giving it life in words tonight for us. Really appreciate that. The three overall main themes, the three overall main colors, I think they all just sort of ring really true and authentic with all of us. I think it's a great sort of complement to what we've done on sort of visioning and coming up with some core values through the strategic plan process. And I think this really brings that to light in a visual manner. So really looking forward to seeing this go, to seeing it move forward, assuming it does so in the next few minutes when we vote. And just want to thank everyone for all their work, and certainly as someone with some connections to the only high school in Wilmot, seeing some more green around the township will never be a bad thing either. So green and white is always nice, and the blue, the Nith blue, and the sun gold are also quite lovely. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gerber. Councillor Fisher.
Yeah, I'm going to, through you, Mayor Armstrong, I'm going to echo what everybody else said. Thank you so much for all the hard work by Matt, your team, and Ms. Middleholtz, your team. I do love the logo. I think it's awesome. Green's my favorite color, so hit me off right away. So thanks a lot, and I love it.
Okay, thank you. And I mean, I have to say, yeah, I echo all that. I mean, there's a lot of hard work, and as these projects are, and I think you came through with flying colors. So thank you very much, guys, and for all the hard work. And we look forward to the transformation. So we do have a recommendation. The recommendation that the recommendations and corporate identity presented by Abs and Mugs Inc. and endorsed by the senior management team for direction to be approved, and that the Information and Legislative Services Department be directed to implement the branding strategy. And that is moved by Councillor Gordick and Councillor Fanning, and that is all in favor. All. Councillor Hallman, you're only allowed to put up one hand. Come on now. That is carried. Thank you, guys. Thank you for all the hard work. And thank you again, Matt.
Thank you.
So the next item we have is the municipal budget. Mr. Kelly.
Thank you, Mayor Armstrong and members of council. Mr. Jeffries, if you can throw up the presentation there. So on behalf of the entire corporate services team, my peers on senior management, and the entire budget committee, I'm pleased to present an overview of the 2021 municipal budget being brought forward for formal approval this evening. Next slide. So yeah, it was just 8 weeks ago that the 2021 budget committee officially kicked off our budget deliberations, and over that time we moved from a target levy guideline in December to a complete and balanced budget package before you this evening. All of that in spite of it being within a virtual environment under COVID-19 protocols. So something definitely to be proud of the accomplishment. We did establish a target levy of 1.9% back in December, as well as continuation of 2% dedicated infrastructure levy. We reviewed the results, unaudited results from 2020, then looked over our capital forecast and 2021 capital program. Finally, proposing an operating budget for levy funded operations as well as all user pay divisions. And we're here tonight seeking council approval. Next slide, please. So beginning in early December, as noted, there was a guideline set based on October's core CPI, which was 1.90%. Assessment growth continued to be relatively low in 2020 at 1.15%. And the committee did approve continuing our infrastructure investment to help build the necessary internal capacity to close our infrastructure funding deficit. We will continue as staff to monitor funding requirements moving forward from an infrastructure perspective, but we're pleased to see that the committee and council have continued to support this important funding mechanism. So as you can see in the graphic, the combination of the three factors resulted in additional levy funding of approximately $440,000, bringing the 2021 municipal levy to just over $9 million. Next slide, please. I like to provide these each year just as a little look back as to where we've come over the last 10 years. So this graphic shows you the historical inflationary levy adjustments. So essentially this just is showing you what core CPI has been in October for the last 10 years. Our practice is to use this to promote stability and fiscal responsibility, aligning our adjustments to that near 2% range. The 2021 inflationary adjustment added $166,000 in funding, or $18.63 to the average residential property owner. Next slide, please. Assessment growth, as noted, was slightly lower year over year, and staff are hopeful through the works in development services and engineering, getting new developments up and on stream, that this will climb back to higher levels. The 1.15% of assessment growth generates just under $100,000 in additional funding to the general levy this year. Next slide, please. So the combination of the in-year assessment growth and inflationary levy increase brought what's shown here, this new funding. 2021 net levy increase from assessment inflation is slightly below what we saw in 2020. We have indicated over the past few years the need to look at alternate revenue tools moving forward, especially with some of the challenges we have had historically securing senior government funding, and moving forward post-COVID, that'll be even more challenging. So this includes the approach that we took to bring the dedicated infrastructure investment in 2020. Next slide, please. So the spike that you see on this slide in 2020 was associated with a one-time special levy for increased levels of service. The 2021 combined increase includes our inflationary adjustment, the 2% infrastructure levy, without the need for any special levies to meet service level demands for the upcoming year. Next slide, please. So just a quick overview of the 2021 capital program. It's valued at $8.8 million with a number of additional projects being carried forward from 2020 into the current year. It's going to be an extremely busy year for infrastructure projects in Wilmot. Some key projects were listed here on the slide. The full listing is included within the final budget package as part of this council report. Some of the non-infrastructure projects that will be used to support capital plans include phase 2 of our joint service delivery review, the third ice pad site selection and design, Baden West servicing study, infrastructure master plans, and the Beckdale Trunk sanitary sewer environmental assessment. The Prime Minister's Path stakeholder consultation is also included as previously approved as part of this 2021 capital program, and that's set to commence soon with consultant selection approved in late 2020. Health and safety, as always, remains the township's #1 priority, and the 2021 program included corporate security program investments, fire services, equipment replacements, and several safety-related projects and initiatives at the WRC and administration complex. Also, for those in New Hamburg, the multi-year reconstruction of Wilmot and Church Streets in downtown New Hamburg will be, is anticipated to be substantially completed in 2021, while the regional reconstruction of Snyder's Road in Baden is projected to kick off sometime in 2021. Finally, a number of projects will continue our efforts to improve outdoor recreation amenities through all township communities. So with that program, council can prepare to see a number of tender and RFP awards coming forward to you later this quarter for your approval. Next slide, please. This graphic just quickly shows how we fund the capital program. The light blue shaded area, the largest portion of funding is derived from our infrastructure reserve funds, which stresses the importance of our infrastructure levy. Critical funding continues to come from senior government sources, which highlights the importance of open and productive dialogue with counterparts at the provincial and federal level to ensure stable, reliable, and predictable funding through sources such as federal gas tax, Ontario Community Infrastructure Fund, and the Ontario Municipal Partnership Fund. Mr. Whittington and myself will be advocating for these funding mechanisms as part of pre-budget consultations with the province on February 9th. The gray shaded area indicates the current tax levy dollars contributed to capital, which represents just over $1.5 million. Next slide, please. So following the endorsement of the current year program, the committee reviewed and endorsed the 10-year forecast. It sits at approximately $92 million over the 10-year horizon. And as our asset management practice continues to mature, forecasts will continue to be foundational in building long-term infrastructure plans with stronger support for evidence-based decision-making. Other key inputs to our long-term plan have been noted on the slide, most notably the strategic plan and fire master plan, which were both approved in 2020, bringing a number of new initiatives to the forecast in later years. Next slide, please. This is a graphical representation, might be tough to see unless you got a big screen beside you, but of the funding sources that support our capital program. So our key focus from a fiscal perspective is the area at the base of each column. This space represents the current levy funded portion of capital spending. So that's the tax dollars from the current year that are put towards capital. We target an inflationary increase to this amount every year and rely on other funding sources to balance the capital program. So as you can see, the 2021 levy funding is approximately $1.5 million, increasing gradually to just over $2 million at the tail end of the 10-year. As discussed in our committee meetings and in other reports, reliance upon development charges and infrastructure reserves will present cash flow challenges in the near term due to some large-scale underground infrastructure needs. Wilmot has been debt-free for several years, but staff have been and will continue to research best practices from a debt financing perspective to ensure that our long-term operational needs aren't jeopardized in any way by future debt servicing costs. Next slide, please. So the operating budget process followed our guidelines from the committee and include a net transfer of just over $336,000 to levy funded reserves. This was definitely a challenge, meeting a 1.9% inflationary target amidst COVID-19 operating pressures, clawbacks, and OMPF funding. However, we were fortunate through the dedication of everybody on staff to contain costs in 2020. We carried forward a significant amount of funding from the Safe Restart program, which was sufficient to meet our community demands for services in 2021. A few additional levels of service have been included in the 2021 budget for HVAC and lift station maintenance programs, increased municipal drain activity levels, and the annualized cost to maintain our new P25 emergency services radio technology. Numerous minor capital projects totaling nearly $140,000 are noted within the operating budget detail from our February 1st meeting. And we've also, as noted, made a strong commitment to continue growing our culture of health and safety at our core. The operating budget includes an expanded investment for health and safety training and additional PPE at approximately $90,000. Most notable, obviously, is the drastic reductions in rental and admission revenues projected in 2021 due to COVID-19 gathering restrictions. Overall operating revenues are projected to be nearly $1 million below 2020 levels. We really hope to see this rebound once we start to climb out of COVID protocols later in the year and into 2022. Staff continue to advocate and represent the interests of all 4 townships with regards to the province's OMPF funding. However, it seems that the 15% reductions are anticipated to continue for the next several years, again underscoring importance of our commitment to the infrastructure levy. Next slide, please. So the majority of costs and revenues continue to come from parks, facilities, and recreation services, predominantly at the Wilmot Recreation Complex. So under the leadership of Ms. Jackson, staff continue to control costs and promote efficiencies that are offsetting the drastic impacts of COVID-19 on recreation revenues. The next orange area, it wasn't colored orange purposefully, Jeff, but the orange area is Public Works and Engineering, which represents the next largest portion of our operating expenses. Mr. Molenhuis oversees the broad duties of this service area in order to maintain Wilmot's expansive road and bridge infrastructure network throughout construction season and into the winter months. The remainder of expenditures from an operating perspective are distributed across general government, protective services, cultural services, and development services. So along with the previous mentioned department heads, all departments and divisions under Ms. Middleholtz, Chief Leeson, Ms. Locke, and Mr. Okrafka continue to meet demands of this community, the growing demands of the community through the promotion of efficiencies and fiscal responsibility across their entire groups. Next slide, please. So after establishing our target levy at the December meeting, we met and discussed the 2021 municipal grants program. Mr. Brian Kim, our financial analyst, administered the online application process, reviewed applications, and I was very pleased to see that we approved as a committee over $65,000 in supports to community groups and voluntary organizations. $5,000 will be funded via Kitchener-Waterloo Community Foundation contribution to our Discover Your Wilmot program, while just over $7,000 is being carried forward from the 2020 program. So on behalf of the committee and council, I just want to say that we're thankful for the tireless efforts of community volunteers in helping Wilmot to thrive throughout COVID-19, and are glad we can support them in 2021. These funds will be virtually presented at our February 22nd council meeting with distribution of funds to follow. Next slide, just quickly running through the user pay divisions, which are outside of the levy funded operations. They were each endorsed by the committee. Cemetery services are projected to have a balanced budget in 2021, though that's a projection. Activity levels at Riverside Cemetery are obviously unpredictable, but at this point in time, we're predicting a balanced budget for the year. Building services is projecting net draw from reserve funds to balance 2021 requirements, but as we continue to mention, future years of residential, commercial, and industrial growth will help to eliminate the current deficit within this reserve. Next slide. Our utilities budget, so water and wastewater, totals $6.4 million. A net transfer to infrastructure reserve funds of $1.3 million. Water rates remained static in an effort to assist with some of the fiscal challenges of COVID. So they're still at $2.11 per cubic meter. Sanitary increased by 1.9% to $2.78 per cubic meter. And then from an average bill perspective, the average consumer uses 31 cubic meters per bill, and that'll increase the total cost by $1.61. Finally, the next slide, sorry, the distribution of costs. So as you can see, the vast majority of costs are covering regional costs for water distribution and sanitary treatment. Staffing and operating costs come in at around 29%, while the remainder goes to cover our infrastructure needs. So modest, just so council's aware, modest rate increases are anticipated moving forward across all municipalities as we work to meet the requirements under safe drinking water legislation and move towards full system sustainability. So the last slide, just to summarize, and thank you all for your time. I think it's important that we let the community know what's all involved in this budget. So This budget was built through collaborative efforts from all departments and continues to reflect our strategic priority of fiscal responsibility and responsible governance. I want to thank all staff that are present tonight and those across the organization for support and efforts in generating this budget. And finally, thank you to Council for your support through a challenging budget year and the shared desire you continue to have to meet the service levels in Wilmot in a manner that's fiscally responsible and balanced. So with that, thank you, and I'm open to any questions from Council.
Hey, thank you, Mr. Kelly. And yes, we want to thank you for all the hard work that you and your team have put out with all of the senior management, and actually all of the staff have it's been a big project from everybody from top to bottom. So we really appreciate all that hard work. So thank you. So we have some questions and comments. We'll start with Councillor Hallman. No, sorry, I will start with, look, Councillor Fenning, you're first on the list over here, so go ahead.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Armstrong. I want to say thank you. It's been an incredible year, and it's been very difficult for everybody, but all of you around this horseshoe, virtual horseshoe, have really served the community well. And thank you very much to Mr. Kelly for the explanation to the community. I think it's really important. And I think that, you know, we need to be talking about these things more. The responsibility we have to the future and to ensure that we have enough in place and we've planned adequately is not something that should be glossed over or rushed through. So as much as some people may find budgets boring, I think they're pretty fantastic. And thank you very much for all of your hard work and for delivering this responsible and well done budget. Thank you.
Councillor Fisher.
Through you, Mayor Armstrong, just a comment, another great job by the finance department and all the other departments and their staff again. 2020 was a difficult year and it looks to be the same again for this year coming up. But I personally feel blessed that we have such competent staff at the township. And I know the Wilmot citizens appreciate the hard work that goes into this budget and the community. I know I appreciate all you've done. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Next is Councillor Hallman.
Thank you, through the mayor. My thanks to corporate services, the many hours that go into this and how challenging it must have been this year. And my thanks to SMT and obviously all of our staff who have navigated these interesting waters to get us to where we are today. So my thanks to you all. I do have a question, just a brief question for Mr. Kelly. Can you email council just that PDF package of that we can share with residents?
Of the, sorry, of the...
Of your presentation.
Yeah, of the presentation. Yep,
yes.
No problem.
Wonderful. Thank you. And other than that, thanks everybody.
It won't have the nice new logo on it because you guys only approved that tonight. Otherwise it would have been a little bit. Yeah, no problem.
Thank you, Councillor Hallman. Councillor Gordick.
Thank you, through you, Mayor, to Mr. Kelly and the senior management team, as well as the staff. I thank you. It's obviously, as everybody has said, been a difficult year. To that, Mr. Kelly did allude to some of the issues that came out. I've had just not very many, one or two people reach out to me with regards to some of the other municipalities, I think in particular Ayr with a 0% increase. Totally understand why we're doing it. However, from a budgetary perspective, I would appreciate maybe perhaps if there was an explanation as to why we chose not to. I understand probably for me, I know a lot of it is, it seems easy enough as an answer, but perhaps from your perspective, if you could just speak to that as to why we didn't have a 0%. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah. And this, I guess, through Mayor Armstrong, and this is in no way to disagree with the approaches of other municipalities. There's unique some circumstances everywhere. I do take quite seriously, as everybody does on senior management, the idea of how fiscally responsible Wilmot is, and to me, I've spoke publicly a lot of times on using the property tax regime and the property tax system as a way to support income-based challenges, which COVID-19 has brought forth. It isn't technically the most appropriate system to do it. So what we looked at with the budget, and we have, as we have in previous years, relied on inflation, the price increase that we see across the board in all our service areas to dictate what we require for funding to make it happen. So we look to the community and service level expectations. The costs to provide those service levels aren't going to go down just because of something as terrible as COVID. The costs don't go down. So from a fiscal responsibility standpoint, we need to ensure that we're collecting adequate funding distributed fairly through the property tax system to fund all the costs of the service areas that people ask for. So strategic plan provided guidance and reinforcement to us that the services that we're providing are the services this community wants. The dollar amount to provide those services required a slight adjustment this year. Again, I felt it was relatively low at 1.9%. I believe I don't have my report in front of me now, but I think $38.23 for the average property owner. That can be challenging during these times, but at the same time, the services need to be there for our community, and that's essentially the approach that's taken here in Wilmot.
Thank you for that, Mr. Kelly. I appreciate your response to that. Thank you.
Okay. See no further comments, so we have the recommendation before us here, and the recommendation that the 2021 municipal budget dated February 1st, 2021, as recommended by the Ad Hoc Budget Advisory Committee, be approved, and further, that the Director of Corporate Services / Treasurer be authorized to prepare the necessary levying bylaw to raise $9,087,350 for township purposes for general taxation. Moved by Councillor Hellman, second by Councillor Gordick. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. So we're now into the consent agenda. If members of council have any questions and want to remove any item from the consent agenda, please indicate so now, as we will not take questions on consent items unless the items are requested to be moved from the regular agenda. Councillor Hallman.
Thank you. Through the mayor, I'd like to have report number FRS 2021-001 removed, please.
So that's item 10.4.
10.2.
10.2. Okay. All right, that will be removed. Councillor Gordick.
Can I just clarify, please, through you, Mayor Armstrong, to Ms. Middleholtz? I don't have a question per se about, I just wanted a clarification. Would I need to remove a report for that?
Thank you, through you, Mayor Armstrong. Sometimes with clarifying questions, they result in more questions. So it is best to remove it, just to keep everything nice and clean.
Okay. Hate to do this, sorry. Can I have 10.1 removed then, please, for my clarification question? Thank you.
Thank you. We are then looking at
Through you, Mayor Armstrong, we would be looking at removing 10.1,
Yep.
FD 2021-01,
Mhm.
and 10.2, FRS 2021-001. So when we get to the recommendation, presumably if it's moved and seconded, those first two reports would be removed
Right.
from the recommendation.
Yes. Okay, so I will read the recommendation that reports numbers PW 2021-01, CK 2021-001, PW 2021-02, DS 2021-01, and ILS 2021-05 be approved. So that is moved by Councillor Fenning, Councillor Fisher. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. So we will deal with the first item, which is the fire department quarterly activity. Councillor Gordick, you had the question on that?
Yes, through you, Mayor Armstrong. To Chief Leeson, I was just curious, you made a comment with regards to the number of recruits, and I believe it said 9 for the volunteers. I'm just wondering, is that enough? Will there be further recruitment? And that was just really all I wanted to know, is how we were doing with that as far as the numbers that we were able to achieve for this year.
Through you, Mayor Armstrong. Yes, that was the number that we arrived at this year. In fact, we actually took on one additional recruit due to their outstanding resume, and added them to the addition of 8, and so we went to 9 this year, and that's continuing to maintain our standards. Council has approved us an allocation of 90 firefighters for the service, and that will put us at 87. So we're tracking towards the 90 by, I would assume, 2022. We will be able to meet that benchmark of 90 firefighters. So yeah, we've done well in the last few years bringing it forward. We had a great, in spite of COVID and the complications of recruitment this year, we still had a successful recruit drive. Hope that answers your question. Okay.
Okay, thank you. And we'll move the recommendation that the fire department activity report for the 4th quarter of 2020 be received for information purposes. That is moved by Councillor Gordick, second by Councillor Fenning. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. And the next item is the Parks and Recreation quarterly report. And Councillor Hallman.
Thank you, Mayor. So through the mayor, I have a question to Ms. Jackson. Can you comment on, where is my question? Have you filled that position yet of the, what is the position called? Sorry, I'm leaving my notes and I have to scroll back up.
The parks and facilities operator position.
Yes, thank you. I'm like scrolling my notes. Yes.
You're welcome. Through the mayor. No, not yet. It will be commencing in the spring, so we have not posted for that position yet.
Okay, thank you. And then I also see that one of our staff members is leaving for maternity leave, so best wishes to that staff member. And another question, I guess, is actually perhaps to Mr. Kelly. The subsidy use graph is excellent. I really appreciate that. Is that also possible to get that sent separately in a PDF to council?
Yeah, I'd love to take credit for that, but I believe it was probably Miss Jones that put that together. Okay. But yeah, I'm sure they can forward a copy of that too.
Ms. Jones can forward that to council. That would be greatly appreciated. And that's it for me on that one.
And if there's no further questions. Okay. The recommendation that the Parks, Facilities, and Recreation Services activity reports for the fourth quarter of 2020 be received for information. That is moved by Councillor Hallman and Councillor Fenning. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. So the next item is the Wilmot Street reconstruction and Gingrich Road water main improvements. And Mr. Molyneux.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Armstrong. With budget approval this evening, we are pleased to recommend award of contract for Phase 2 of Wilmot Street reconstruction and Gingrich Road water main connection improvements. This generally includes road and underground service works and sidewalk connectivity works in both project locations, as well as on-street parking and preliminary works for an EV charging station at Kirkpatrick Park. The tender was released in late 2020 with good uptake and 12 competitive bids received. The lowest bid received was from Beach Infrastructure. Council may recall that Beach completed the other half of the road in this project area in 2020. Beach had scheduling issues in the tail end of 2020 as they were trying to finish up Wilmot and Church Street. And as a result, they were delayed to completion of surface works for Phase 1. However, staff were satisfied with the quality of work completed for that project and recommend award of contract for Phase 2 and the Gingrich water main works. Following award, staff will work with the contractor to determine the 2021 schedule and details for construction. Once we know more about scheduling and some of those smaller items for construction, that we will communicate with residents and businesses who will be impacted by construction activity in the area. I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Councillor Hallman.
Thank you, through the mayor. I believe it was last year that we discussed getting a sign that where there was accesses to open to local businesses. Have those signs been purchased yet?
Through you, Mayor Armstrong, we typically would include those as any capital project. So for part of this project, project signage will be certainly something that will take place. So we'll have signage that will speak to our funding partners for the project with, I believe, the province and the federal government, as well as speaking to some of those local impacts and business impacts as well. So we will have signage that will be part of the project delivery for this project.
Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Fanning.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Armstrong. To Mr. Molyneux, and just a comment generally, I'm happy to see this project proceeding, and having discussed with some of the residents, they'd been unhappy with some of the scheduling and a few other details. But I appreciate that staff are satisfied with the quality of the work, and particularly that the quality of the work underground, which is what is lasts a lot longer. I don't know if you have any other comments you'd like to add to that, Director Molyneux, but thank you.
If I may, through you, Mayor Armstrong,
Yep.
we certainly acknowledge that major construction and reconstruction projects do have impacts to our residents, and we do our best to, from a staff perspective, we do our best to mitigate some of those challenges. Construction in a COVID environment is for managing multiple crews and for managing different locations for contractors, it can be very difficult. So I don't think it was uncommon for some of those issues that we saw on our project last year. But that being said, we certainly do our best to mitigate some of those challenges for our residents and do our best to communicate with them, as well as work with the contractor to get the project done.
Okay, seeing no further questions, we'll call it recommendation that RFT 2020-24 be awarded to Beach Infrastructure Group Limited for the reconstruction of Wilmot Street in New Hamburg and Gingrich Road water main connection improvements in Baden as per their contract tender bid submitted on January 14th, 2021 in the amount of $1,957,305.10 plus HST. And that is moved by Councillor Gordick, Councillor Fenning. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. The next item is from Public Works and the Horticultural Society Agreement. Ms. Jackson.
Thank you, Mayor. So the Horticulture Society, as I'm sure all of you are aware, has played a significant role in the township for beautification for so many years. And historically, there's been a written agreement with this organization. And last year, with COVID, the beginning of the pandemic, we were working on renewing that agreement and went ahead with a 1-year agreement with the intention of bringing back a 5-year agreement to council. And here we are this evening to acknowledge this wonderful organization and the work that they do. I do want to acknowledge and thank Judy Han-Yutzi, the president, and Marlene Zima, I hope I pronounced that right, Marlene, who is the secretary. And they do tireless work with this committee to help out our staff and make sure that our floral beds, our garden beds, and of course the beautiful heart bed at the Castle Kilbride to make sure that they're in wonderful shape each year. Last year was a particularly difficult year, and the Horticulture Society helped our staff even more than usual with us being lower than normal staff levels. So with that, this agreement is a 5-year agreement. We're looking for council support to renew this wonderful relationship with our volunteers in the community, and both the Hort Society and staff are recommending that this agreement be approved this evening. If you have any questions, myself and Manny Jones, Manager of Customer Service and Community Development, are available to answer your questions. Thank you.
Councillor Fenning.
I am very pleased to see this come forward. And Mr. Kelly made mention in the budget presentation about just how valuable our volunteers are in this community. And this organization is certainly one that has stepped up incredibly and done really phenomenal work for our community. So I'm really happy to see this come forward, and want to take the opportunity to say thank you again to all the members of the organization, and look forward to working with them.
Thank you. Okay, seeing no further questions, the recommendation that the 5-year agreement between the Township of Wilmot and the Wilmot Horticultural Society be endorsed. That is moved by Councillor Hallman, Councillor Fenning. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Next is the multi-year accessibility plan. Ms. Murray.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Armstrong. In accordance with the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disabilities Act, staff have updated the multi-year accessibility plan as presented to you in your council package. Staff also presented the plan to the Grand River Accessibility Advisory Committee for their comment and feedback. Feedback received from them was very favorable, and GRAC fully supported the updated plan. It is important to note that GRAC recognizes that the accessibility and barrier-free access does have limitations and that it may not always be attainable. Doing what we can to ensure that every effort is made to achieving a barrier-free Wilmot is the goal of all staff and the senior management team. And staff are available to answer any questions you have.
Councillor Fisher.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Armstrong. Just a comment. On page 180 of the document, it shows all the parks in Baden, and there's a small park missing on Brenneman that probably should be added on there. So that's it.
Thank you. I'll make sure that that gets added in there.
Okay.
Okay. Councillor Gordick.
Through you, Mayor Armstrong. I've already sent an email off to to Ms. Middleholtz as Ms. Murray regarding this. It's more of a comment for it just to be included. With regards to any social media posting and stuff, I'd like to reach out and have the addition of camel case being added within the documentation around about page probably 171 or so, I think, within the actions to do, so that the visually impaired are able with their readers to accurately, if there is a hashtag being used, can actually see the difference, have the reader read to them the difference between the wording and the language that's being used in the hashtags. I believe Ms. Baird and the rest of the staff are doing it, but I'm not sure that anybody else out there is aware of what camel case is. So I'd like to see if that could be added. And then second, it's just a small thing, but I think the wording is important. On page I need my glasses. On page 167, the 4th paragraph up, I'm just wondering if the word allows can be removed, and just to change it slightly to say people with disabilities can be accompanied by either a guide dog or service animal. I think the word allows sort of is a bit of a negative, that there's some sort of difference there, but if there's a comment on that, but that was sort of just the one thing that I had. Thank you.
Ms. Middleholtz.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Armstrong. So going back, first of all, to the first comment with regards to hashtags, and yes, operationally, when we are adding hashtags to our social media posts, generally speaking, we will use camel case, which is where the first letter of each word is capitalized, all the rest are lowercase, and generally we would do that. We don't want to limit ourselves too much because there are times where we are looking to have our voices added to a trending post trending hashtag. And if that hashtag is already in a lowercase, then it's sort of defeating the purpose of us if we don't have the same lowercase uppercase combination, because they are case sensitive, so that we have our voices added to that. And as you know, these are clickable links to be able to find more information on the various posts. So we wouldn't make this a shall, we would make it a where possible, more so. And then as for the service animals, guide dogs, there are certain occasions in which we would not, I believe, allow a dog, a service animal, the pool, would be one. I would think the aquatic center, as well as perhaps certain locations within the castle, but perhaps Ms. Locke could more address that. I'm not sure. That was more me making an assumption. So there might be cases like that where a service animal would not be permitted, but either Ms. Jackson or Ms. Locke may want to get into that further.
Ms. Locke?
Thank you, Mayor. I can confirm that we have had service animals inside the museum. They're trained, they come in with their, and we are prepared for it. So we have, and there's been no issues.
Follow up. It's not necessarily that I have an issue through the mayor to Ms. Middleholt. It's just I think the word allows sort of feels a bit condescending. I would just like to remove the word allow and either change it to may be accompanied or can be accompanied. You do cover in that particular document that unless the animal is excluded by other laws. So it's just the actually removing of that first word allows and just putting in the word can or be. People with disabilities can or / may be accompanied by their dog. I'm not saying they have to be. I'm just thinking that the wording should be just a little bit more inclusive.
Through you, Mayor Armstrong, we'll take a look at that and see if that can be changed.
Ms. Jackson, did you wish to comment or?
Through the mayor, I can confirm that the health regulations do have some restrictions with respect to animals on the pool deck, but we would accommodate in a nearby area were someone required to bring a service dog in. So thank you.
Thank you. No further comments or questions. So the recommendation that the 2021-2024 multi-year accessibility plan be endorsed. That is moved by Councillor Fisher, Councillor Fenning, all in favor. That is carried. Thank you. Next is the Canadian Coalition of Inclusive Municipalities. Ms. Middleholtz.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Armstrong. What staff is requesting this evening is an endorsement to continue the investigation and then preparation of an application to join the Canadian Coalition of Inclusive Municipalities. This will be a significant undertaking involving staff time in connection with residents, businesses, organizations, and municipal leaders for inclusivity and diversity throughout the province. Through this application, the township is pledging to put into action concrete steps to address discrimination and racism in Wilmot. I welcome any questions you may have.
Councillor Gerber.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Mayor Armstrong. Appreciate the comment and the feedback on the process to be part of this. And I just wanted to say that it was great to see our initiative to establish a community relations committee made up of members of the Indigenous, Black, and Peoples of Color community be referenced in this document, and that will be a step forward in us sort of living up to our vision of being a cohesive, vibrant, welcoming community, and also from the report, it seems to meet sort of the standards and criteria involved to be an inclusive municipality. So I know that's a fairly recently approved idea and initiative, and it was just encouraging to see it in print and to start to see already maybe some of the impact that can have in our community. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gordick.
Thank you, through the mayor. I'm going to assume this goes to Ms. Middleholtz, just time-wise. With regards to the report, I'm glad that it's come forward, and thank you for that, and so quickly. Wasn't quite sure with timing and the getting the budget out if this would be presented this week or our next council meeting. So thank you very much for that. Secondly, I appreciate that there's a lot of work involved with this. It wasn't, I know it's not an easy undertaking. However, just as a guideline, do we have a time frame where we can expect maybe perhaps a follow-up, where we might be at? I realize that this will be a process with regards to the 10 guidelines that we should be following. So I'm just kind of wondering when we can expect, maybe like in the next quarter, anything that you can give us back on that. Thank you.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Armstrong. This is going to be as I said, a very significant undertaking involving many players. This is us inviting many voices to the table. We're looking at a new advisory committee. We're looking at reaching out to so many people and voices that I'm very hesitant to give a timeline for completion. However, what I can do is maybe state that we can look at an update sort of idea so that council can be made aware of where we're at as other reports are coming forward of a similar theme, if that makes sense. So as we are going through the consultation process with First Peoples Group, we can maybe touch on it so that council and the public is made aware of where we're at. If it's not actually in the report, it couldn't be part of a verbal highlight that we usually give when we do our reports, so that this isn't happening without people being made aware of it. This is a very important project. This is a very important initiative, as all these initiatives are, and wanting to provide information to the public so that they know not only just how to get involved, but also where we're at, I think is going to be a big part of what we're going to be doing.
So follow up, Ms. Middleholtz, through you, Mayor Armstrong. Just out of curiosity, has anybody reached out to, particularly yourself, Ms. Middleholtz, to the Clerk of Guelph to see how their process was? Are you having any guidance from them with regards to this, as they just passed it? They brought it forward at the end of the year, and I believe they just passed it. So I'm just curious as to when they started. I didn't hear much about their process. Just wondering if there's been any discussion with Guelph. Thank you.
Yes, through you, Mayor Armstrong. So certainly Mr. O'Brien and I do converse on occasion. He's part of our area clerks network. So I've spoken with him on various topics over the years. However, he was not the lead on this. I am at this point, after we do this, and if council approves it, then I would probably be reaching out to him. And then seeing who the best person would be to speak with. And yes, certainly any guidance. Our next, perhaps even a closer neighbor, is actually the city of Stratford. They are also, they are members now of the coalition. So I believe that would be another appropriate place for us to reach out to. Shout out to all the municipal clerks in the province of Ontario. We're really great at sharing with each other. So I have lots of colleagues that I'll be able to speak with.
Okay, thank you. No further comments or questions. I shall read the recommendation that staff continue to work with the Canadian Commission for the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization to consider and prepare an application to join the Coalition of Inclusive Municipalities. And that is moved by Councillor Gordick, second by Councillor Fenning. All in favor? That is carried. So now I will call on Councillor Gordick as acting mayor for the month of February to assume the role of chair for the next portion of the meeting.
Thank you, Mayor Armstrong, for that. I did want to say that just as a preamble, is sometimes my internet does kick off and I haven't given contact numbers. So if I freeze, please give me at least a couple of seconds and hopefully I'll come back on, but just in case, I'm just putting that out there. I'm just going through, it's my first time, so my apologies for this to go through. The report that's been prepared by the Integrity Commissioner is to be received. This is the recommendation, and that council passed a subsequent resolution regarding the recommendations contained within the report. Ms. Middleholtz, can you please highlight the report that's been presented to us, ILS 2021-07, please?
Thank you. Through you, Chair Gordick. The staff report is relative to the receiving of the Integrity Commissioner's report, not an endorsement of the recommendation. Following the receipt of the report, a member of council may make a motion concerning the Integrity Commissioner's report and the recommendations contained within. As well, Mayor Armstrong also has the opportunity to address council on this matter if he wishes. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Middleholtz.
My apologies, Chair Gordick. Also, Dr. Williams is in attendance if there's any questions that he can answer for council.
I believe we have delegations for this evening. Is that correct, Ms. Middleholtz?
Through you, Chair Gordick. In addition to the two that you were originally provided, there is a third. I am unaware if the Deputy Clerk has provided you with that update. Okay, so yes, there is a third delegation, Mr. Mathers.
Thank you very much. With that, I'm just going to read something here before going through with the delegations. So before commencing with hearing from delegations, I would like to remind all of the delegations of some guidelines for participation. Please leave your video camera turned off and your microphone muted until you're called upon to speak. Delegations will be allotted 10 minutes to speak and will provide a 2-minute warning provided by Clerk Murray. When your 10 minutes is 2-minute warning when your 10 minutes is nearing completion. We also ask that you leave the meeting once your issue has been addressed and you can continue watching on YouTube. You are then welcome to watch the remainder on YouTube. If you conduct yourself in any of the following manners, it will result with an immediate muting and removal from the meeting, interrupting the councillors, staff, or other delegations, derogatory comments about councillors, staff, or others, hate speech, or defamatory comments. And then I will now call upon the delegations as they're registered. I believe on my sheet it says that Nancy Burris is first, and then Mr. Atkinson is second, and then of course Mr. Mathers is third. If we can have Ms. Burris available, please. Ms. Burris, I believe you're still muted.
Okay, how's that?
Thank you very much.
Can you hear me now? Okay. Thank you, councillors and Mayor Armstrong for this opportunity to address council. I am commenting on the report number 2 of the Integrity Commissioner of February the 1st, 2021. I have read through Robert Williams' Integrity Commissioner's report dated February the 1st, 2021, which recommends a month-long pay cut for Mayor Les Armstrong in regards to media comments made following the removal of the Sir John A. Macdonald statue. This whole thing gave me a pit in my stomach when I first read it, and I feel that no one will ever want to run for council or any public office ever again. The second set, 2 people, of complainants to the Integrity Commissioner is a continuation, I feel, of a witch hunt by individuals who are out for blood. It is disgusting that this issue is allowed to take up more media space and council time. According to the Integrity Commissioner, both complainants disagree with what they perceive to be the mayor's lack of respect for the decision-making process of council and his misrepresentation of the perspectives of those who sought to have it removed. The reporter's quote, and I think that was the title of the article regarding the mayor's disdain, is also a perception. Are we to persecute the mayor because of perceptions and perspectives? I think not. The mayor was being honest when asked his opinion on the matter by the reporter. And did the reporter actually get it right? Mayor Armstrong's media comments were all about him trying to represent my views and what I believe are those of the majority of Wilmot constituents in regard to the statue vandalism and council's decision to remove. A code of ethics should not stand in the way of an elected official being able to state his or her opinion to their electorate. They owe it to their fellow councillors. They owe it to their constituents to stand up for them, even if it means disagreeing with fellow councillors. Did any of the ward councillors formally canvass their constituents in regard to the matters related to the Prime Minister's path and the removal of the statue? Even though my ward councillor sends various township notices to her email list, which I am on, I nor anyone I know of was ever asked our opinion on the matter. But thank goodness the mayor was able to represent my view. I find it totally repulsive that this continued humiliation of our mayor is allowed to endure. He apologized twice publicly for the video he had posted, and in those apologies, he relayed his sorrow for hurting individuals in the community and his commitment to ongoing self-education of racism and his avowed dedication to an open and inclusive Wilmot. Let him get on with the work for which he was duly elected for the rest of his term as mayor. The two anonymous complainants should be ashamed for wasting so much of everyone's time. It's time to stop, let it go, get past it, and move on. I recommend that the report of the Integrity Commissioner of February the 1st, 2021, and especially the recommendation of pay cut, not be accepted. Any councillor who votes in favor of this report will not receive my vote in subsequent elections. Respectfully submitted, Nancy Burse of New Dundee. And I might also add that in the branding report, Mr. Abe, I think his name was, referred to a peaceful Wilmot. And I'd just like to see council and everybody else get back to a peaceful Wilmot. Thank you.
Ms. Burris, any comments or questions to Ms. Burris? Thank you. Mr. Atkinson, are you available, please?
All right, just let me know if you can hear me.
We can, please go ahead.
All right, great, thank you very much. Thank you, Acting Mayor and Council. Well, here we are again, coming to the defense of our beleaguered mayor, who continues to unfairly be the lightning rod for baseless claims, political bullying, and punishment by process. This time, it's a trumped up ethics violation based on the mayor exercising his free speech rights and expressing his opinion about the results of a council vote. The code of ethics is not, I repeat, not intended to silence the opinion of any member of council, and if it is, it should be dismissed immediately as it flies in the face of the democratic process. This also seems like a good place to add that it is the complainant's perception of the mayor's lack of respect for the decision-making process. Perception is 10% what we see and 90% how we interpret it. Two people believe the mayor's attitude is unacceptable. These are undoubtedly the same people that have repeatedly spoken against him in speech, in print, and in social media. These are not unbiased onlookers. And one housekeeping note, if I may. Any council member that is related to either of the complainants from this report must recuse themselves from this vote. It is a clear conflict of interest to be voting on a matter raised by a relative. I ask all councillors to consider this. Although we don't know who the complainants are, I'm sure that if one of them or any of them are related to a councillor, that councillor is aware. Now I want to jump right to Mr. Williams' conclusion that Mayor Armstrong violated the code of ethics in an interview with Mr. Modi of the New Hamburg Independent. In Mr. Williams' own words, Mr. Modi's article forms the basis of the complaint. Interestingly, as has already been mentioned by Ms. Burse, one of the first statements in the article is Mr. Modi's opinion that the mayor didn't hide his disdain with last Monday's decision. This is Mr. Modi's opinion of the mayor's state of mind. Now, unless Mr. Modi is also a trained psychiatrist, his opinion on Mr. Armstrong's state of mind is purely speculative. Nowhere in the article that is quoted in Mr. Williams' report is there any reference to process, only to the result. The code demands respect for the process, but does not and should not, actually it must not, demand agreement with the outcomes. If speaking your opposition to the media is a violation of the code, then no councillor could ever again speak to the media. Media can simply read the official record, and that will be the end of it. This complaint is just another cudgel being used against the mayor by a small group that seem to simply not like him and want him replaced. I was perplexed with Mr. Williams' inclusion of the reference to the BLM video, for which the mayor has already been tarred, feathered, and dragged through the town square. This is completely irrelevant to the complaint and caused me to wonder where Mr. Williams was coming from in this investigation. This is one of the reasons council needs to reject this report. The code states that members must behave with integrity, justice, and courtesy. Part of integrity means speaking the truth. Mr. Armstrong did exactly that. Mr. Armstrong said nothing unjust. Courtesy is somewhat personal and objective, and simply speaking the truth is not being discourteous. In this area, I would submit that Mayor Armstrong did exactly what the code requires, speaking with integrity. In the media relations section, it also says, members of council will accurately and adequately communicate the attitudes and decisions of Wilmot Council, even if they disagree with a majority decision of council. Again, he did exactly this. Nobody is challenging that he said anything disparaging about the process. Stating his opinion of the result is not and cannot be considered a violation. If it is, then it is the code that should be being investigated, not Mr. Armstrong. Mr. Williams states in his report, what the code of conduct precludes, however, is an elected official publicly disparaging any decision taken by council and publicly impugning whatever motives that official believes have led or may have led council to colleagues to that outcome. Mr. Armstrong did not mention motive, which cannot be known. Just pointed out what was true, that persons from outside the community had significantly influenced the decision. Simply disagreeing with council's decision is not disparaging. It's freedom of speech, which we're all supposed to still be able to enjoy in this country. Mr. Williams' report stipulates that the code of conduct is not intended to stifle debate in council. It is also not intended to stifle free speech and expression outside council. If the code can be used to stifle free speech of a council member, it should be repealed immediately. In conclusion, I believe the Integrity Commissioner is wrong, and there's no way to put it nicely. In no way did Mr. Armstrong show lack of respect for the decision-making process of council, nor did he fail to encourage public respect for the municipality's policies. He simply stated his opinion and accurately stated the truth about what had happened. This report should be, and its recommendations must be, rejected outright. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Atkinson. Does anyone have any questions or comments to Mr. Atkinson? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Atkinson, for your time. Mr. Mathers, are you available? You're at the moment muted, Mr. Mathers.
Hello.
Yes, thank you.
Good. Good evening. Mayor Armstrong suggested to a reporter that the people should be heard, and perhaps they were not being heard. At a Wilmot Council meeting in 2020, one council member did not wish to hear the input from the public. The councillor wanted to simply dismiss the delegates from the meeting. And strangely, No other members of council appeared to be outraged by that notion. Before you vote tonight, I ask you to think deeply about that night. Recently, a record reporter in an article ended the article with a question: is there something else going on in Wilmot? Very perceptive. Thank you.
Any comments or questions to Mr. Mathers? Thank you, Mr. Mathers, for your time. Appreciate you turning up. So there is a recommendation. May I have a mover and a seconder for the recommendation of report ILS 2021-07? To accept the report, or to move the seconder, sorry, first and seconder. Mr. Gerber is, and it's the first hand I see.
No,
and Ms. Fenning. Oh, you have a comment. Sorry, Mr.
Yes.
Sorry, Mr. Councilor Gerber. Go ahead.
That's okay. Thank you, Chair Gordick, for acknowledging the hand. I was just wondering, is the process, council comes up with the motion? I don't think the motion is that we accept, like there's not a motion on the floor to accept the report, I don't think. Is that correct?
Correct. At the moment, from what Ms. Middleholtz has told me and advised me, is that we ask for a mover and seconder to the recommendation of the report. That's what I have on my listing. So my apologies. It's my first time chairing. So Ms. Middleholtz, if you can clarify, please.
And I'm not sure I have it right either, Councillor Gordick. That's why.
Yes, certainly through you, Chair Gordick. So what we're looking for right now, or what council may do right now, would be to deal with the staff report recommendation, which is that the report prepared by the Integrity Commissioner be received, and that council pass a subsequent resolution regarding the recommendations contained within the report. So this would be, as I said, just to receive the report. It's not endorsing the report. It's not endorsing the recommendations in the report. It's just you're receiving it, much like what we did earlier this evening with a drain petition. We're just receiving. Thank you for the clarification.
So yes, we're looking for a mover and a seconder for the receipt of the report, please. Mr. Fisher, Councilor Fisher, and Councilor Fenning. Thank you very much. Next, according to my listing, is
pardon me, Chair Gordick?
Yes, go ahead, please.
You would need to ask the members of council to pass the motion.
Thank you very much. Can I all in favor, please? Does that include me as well? Thank you. Appreciate that, Ms. Middleholtz. So next I have Mayor Armstrong. Do you wish to address council on this particular matter?
I have no comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any members of council who wish to make any comments or have any questions with regards to either Mr. Williams or to anyone else regarding the report presented? Councilor Fenning.
Thank you. Through you, Chair Gordick. I would like to request that Mr. Williams clarify, since there has been an insinuation that it is a family member or someone close to a council member that has filed these complaints. And I would like to ask if Mr. Williams is able to either verify that or dispel that myth.
If I may, then, Chair Gordick, I didn't hear all of that. I was just being brought into the meeting, but I think I followed the question. Yes, there are statements made by some of the delegations that are incorrect. These particular requests were not made by anyone connected to any member of council. These were submitted by residents of Wilmot who filed a proper application through the form that is provided. I would like to clarify too, they are not anonymous. These are confidential, but they are not anonymous. Those individuals must sign an affidavit that they believe that what they are saying is correct. That's partly what that word perceived me. They believe what they understood to be correct. So, and they are not connected to members of council, nor are they petitioners who have been involved in other cases.
Thank you, Mr. Williams, for that. Does anybody else have any questions or comments with regards to the report forward to Mr. Williams? Councillor Fisher.
Thank you, Chair Gordick. Just a question for Dr. Williams, if we could. There have been several articles in the Kitchener Record claiming that there is no violation by the mayor. Could you give us your response to those articles, please?
Yes, I can, and it touches on some of the comments made earlier. Again, as I said, it's very clear. My role is not to go out and look for a problem, if you will. People come to me with a request for an investigation. That's what happened. These investigations were based on the newspaper story, that's true, published in a reputable media outlet, that those petitioners wished to have examined in the context of the code. And I want to be very clear, the code is not saying you as members of council can't have debates, can't have viewpoints, can't have strong views. What the code says, once council has made a decision, council is expected to, if you will, honor that decision. The matter is then closed. People can have all kinds of discussions leading up to it, at the meetings, all of those kinds of things. This is about a concept that is in that code that says once a decision is made, members of council are expected to respect that decision. So my sense is that they're not news articles, they're opinion pieces that I've seen, are trying to construe what happens beforehand with what happens after. And I'm working with the code that makes that clarification. Again, I didn't invent it. The code makes that very clear. Members of council are expected to respect the decision reached by their colleagues. The article, as I read it, and as the petitioner has asked me to examine it, felt that that is not what happened. Again, that's the perception that I worked through and reached a certain conclusion that is found in the report.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. Is there anyone else that would like to have a comment? Oh, I see Mr. Councillor Gerber. Please go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Chair Gordick, through you to Integrity Commissioner Williams. A couple of questions. I know in some cases the concerns are somewhat intertwined with the nature of the code of conduct itself, and I think two things that I've sort of heard, tonight, and in feedback from people, conversations, emails that we've all been receiving since the council agenda went out. One deals with the issue of the anonymity of the people filing, and second would be this idea that, which you just explained, about supporting the decision after the fact versus what you say in a debate during the fact. I guess my question is, are both of those elements of Wilmot's code of conduct, are they baked into basically into the Municipal Act's expectation of code of conducts? The reason I'm asking is we're sort of going to be reviewing ours in the next year or two, and I'm wondering, are those things that we have leeway on, or are those things that, like I said, are sort of baked into the Municipal Act as far as codes of conducts for municipal councillors?
My short answer, Councillor, is that they're not specified in the Municipal Act. The Act talks about establishing a code. The code is developed around expectations of what is appropriate conduct and behavior. There are, if you will, best practices, and Clerk made a reference earlier to sharing information. Your code was developed internally in 2007. The language may be different than most, but I would suggest that both of the points you raised are, if not legislated arrangements, they are standard procedures in the codes that I have looked at. What we're talking about is individuals who wish to file a complaint, but don't wish to put themselves in any risk of possible reprisal from anyone. It's not unlike a whistleblower saying, I think something needs to be examined, please do so, but I don't want to have to be out there trying to defend what I thought was there, because there are cases where those expectations are not met. So it's about confidentiality, not anonymity. An individual, as I said a moment ago, must file a document. It is an affidavit that is attested to. So you have to identify yourself. It's not the plain brown envelope under a door somewhere. This is someone who genuinely feels there is something that should be examined and puts their name on a document with supporting evidence to say, please examine this. And I, you know, for whatever reason they do it, and I'm not going to be, let me put it this way. Anyone who wishes to do that has a right to do that. It's not up to the Integrity Commissioner to weed out requests at the outset simply because of who it is. So that I think would be a standard point. So, and confidentiality, as I do allude to in the report, there is a reference in the Municipal Act that the Integrity Commissioner can treat those kinds of matters in confidence. It is not necessary. It's not an obligation to disclose any matters which are necessary for the report. So this again is working around people's identity. It's in confidence. It's not anonymous. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I do have a couple other follow-ups, so okay. I appreciate that information. You're clarifying tonight that the filers of these complaints were not related to members of Township Council. Is that not in a way revealing, or at least unrevealing, their identity in a way? I would have expected a no comment to that, and I'm not. I don't think it's germane, to tell you the truth, but I just thought it was interesting in the name of anonymity that, like, well, we could almost play 20. Like, I don't want to get into a situation where we're playing 20 questions. Do they live on, do they live on Hamilton Road? Yes or no. I mean, well, that's just an aside, but.
Well, there are 22,000 people in Wilmot. This is 2 people.
Yeah.
And the question that came up earlier was, did it have anything to do with council or staff or anyone who has an official connection to the municipality? And the answer was no.
Okay. Again, just as part of that,
was about the before and after, if you will, the notion of I think.
Yes. Sorry. Yes.
Yeah, and again, that's a component of most of the codes that I've looked at, because we're talking about establishing confidence that the enterprise, if you will, is acting in a way that respecting one another, respecting the process that you're following, respecting the opportunity to make a decision on behalf of the community, and then basically saying, that's that. I mean, if we look at the Municipal Act, the authority of the municipality is vested in the council. Council has made a decision. That's the end of it. And my sense is that doesn't mean you keep on going back over it once the decision is reached. It's about honoring the decision that you've reached, whether you agreed with it or not. Again, that language is in the code. It says you're expected to support a council decision even if you disagree. And I think in this particular context, without getting into great detail, if let's say that newspaper interview, the mayor had said, I disagreed with what council did and stopped there, we wouldn't have had a problem. It was the messages that came out after that went on into other directions that I think are part of the issue. You certainly have a right to say, I don't agree with what we did, but it's when it moves into some other direction that it, if you will, crosses a line.
And again, I would just confirm that, I mean, I'm assuming this was part of the process. I think I read it sort of in between the lines in the report, but in your follow-up investigations, which I'm guessing included conversations with the reporter and with Mr. Armstrong, we are confident that the quotes conveyed in the article are accurate. And again, I'm not questioning anyone's motives here. I just know that, you know, you're taking notes, you're recording something. We can assume that's the case in this in the article.
Yes,
no one has taken issue with that, right?
You can. I heard nothing from anyone that suggested that these were misquotes or somehow inaccurate.
Okay, and then I just have just a couple more, just to the general process. I understand that if there are unsuccessful claims filed, so if people do file, you know, citizens were to file a complaint that you would find not to be a violation, we hear about those as well, right? Council gets reports on those as well. I believe we have over the years, and I just want to clarify that for people that, you know, the idea that this is happening all the time. You know, it's not like there's been 10 complaints and 2 of them have gone through. Is that correct?
No, the legislative requirement is that the Integrity Commissioner must report to council when an investigation has been conducted.
Okay.
Even if it does not result in any kind of finding that there's been a violation. Yes.
Thank you. And then I guess just the last thing that I can think of right now, then I'll stop, is in your experience as an Integrity Commissioner, what's the how often are your recommendations or even the findings accepted wholeheartedly versus modified by a council?
It's very hard to make that as a generalization. I mean, as we've said earlier I think at the end of last year, this is new territory. We haven't had to deal with these kinds of matters in Wilmot or even at the regional level. To be able to generalize, you're getting into a wholly different community and other kinds of stories. So no, I'm not in a position to say what that outcome is. Council is quite, you know, certainly does not have to accept the recommendation for any kind of a sanction. That is certainly within your prerogative. And to basically say, you know, we've got a report, thanks, and that's the end of it. Again, that's within your prerogative.
Appreciate your time and your attention. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gerber. Is there anyone else that would like to make any comments or questions regarding the report? Councillor Fenning, please.
Thank you. Through you, Chair Gordick. I have a general statement just about, you know, my thoughts on what we're being asked to decide tonight. And having listened to everyone who's reached out, it doesn't give me any joy or sense of satisfaction to have to decide on this. Rather, it's distasteful, but necessary duty to uphold the democratic institution which I swore to serve and respect. I wholeheartedly agree with residents who've expressed dismay at the amount of time and energy being consumed to address this. However, I believe this difficult conversation is necessary. Politics, many people have said to me since I was elected that they would never run for office. And it's precisely because of the unpleasantness that often accompanies decisions that are not unanimous. As outlined in the report, the statements made by the mayor were disrespectful to the decision-making process and the office he has sworn to uphold. And there's a question of whether those statements were accurate. I called the mayor and spoke to him myself to ask him if they were inaccurately reported, and he said they were not. Those were his words directly to me. So this is not a finding that was arrived at by a political process. The Office of the Integrity Commissioner has conducted an investigation and is presenting their findings in this report for council to address. Also, according to the legislative rule, they've presented a recommendation of penalty for council to consider. That the comments the mayor made can be seen as offending me personally doesn't matter. Taking personal offense requires energy I choose not to spend on this. But here's what does matter. If the decisions made by council can be baselessly maligned with impunity, we all lose, each and every one of us. One of the most troubling aspects of this for me is the mayor's claim that council caved to outside lobbyists. By making that statement, the mayor effectively disenfranchised all local residents who lobbied in favor of the decision we took. That includes people who have lived most of their lives here or whose families have lived here for generations. Most egregiously, it includes Indigenous people who not only live in this community, but whose ancestors have inhabited this land for millennia. That should be deeply disturbing to each and every person in this community, regardless of their perspective on this issue. A personal opinion of that sort is one thing, but the rhetoric of outsiders taking something from our community is a dangerously divisive one. It is, in fact, antithetical to the values this community is so proud of embodying. One may agree or disagree with the decision taken. And I have no problem having a conversation with anyone who disagrees with my perspective or wants to change my mind. I'm open to that. It's also my job to answer, as I feel I am now, to how I arrive at a decision that I take. But once the vote is final, each member of this council is oath bound to uphold it and the integrity of the democratic process by which it was arrived at. Mayor Armstrong, twice I've asked you privately, because that's been my response to this situation. I was very concerned about the tone of comments. I called you to ask you to either retract or correct if they had been if you had been misquoted. May I ask you a couple questions tonight? I'm not a great lip reader, but I think he said yes.
Through you, Chair Gordick. Yeah. So if there's questions and Mayor Armstrong is going to answer them, that's procedurally that's okay. Just so I know we're in a bit different situation and people in different chairs here, but yeah.
Councilor Penny, go ahead.
Mayor Armstrong, do you believe that residents should have a right to see things differently and not be considered an outsider?
I'm sorry, you'll have to explain it. I mean, what your question is saying that residents are allowed to speak and not be considered an outsider. Is that what you're asking me?
I'm asking you to confirm what I believe to be your position, that just because someone disagrees with you doesn't mean they're an outsider.
I at no time said that. I have no time said that anybody that disagrees me is considered an outsider. I've never said that.
No, but when you said that council caved to outsiders, that implies inherently that the residents of this community who were on the opposite side of the question that you are outsiders. That's what that implication is. And that's why that statement is a problem. That's what creates. Do you see what I'm getting at?
I see what you're trying to get at, Councillor Fenning, but if I say the word outsider, that means somebody outside the township. And that doesn't mean any resident who lives in the township. I know that any comment any of us make or any decision we make, we're not going to please everybody within the township. But my comment was about people who do not live in the township. So if you're trying to get me to or have the people think that I consider people inside the township as outsiders if they don't agree with me, that's not correct.
Mayor Armstrong, in fact, what I'm trying to do is help you to express to the residents who feel like you have said that they are outsiders. I'm trying to help you to express that you don't view them that way. Because I think I've asked you privately to take leadership to help heal the divide this toxic rhetoric has created. And I've pledged my support to you in doing that. And tonight I'm asking you the same thing publicly. Mayor Armstrong, will you take a stand as a leader and recognize the right of residents in this community to hold a different opinion than council, any member of council, without fear of being labeled an outsider?
Well, Councillor Fanning, at this point in time, we are having a debate as to your interpretation of my statement as compared to mine. You're making the interpretation and trying to convince not only myself, but others that in my statement, that it encompasses people who live in the township as outsiders. And that's not true. And I will never admit to that because I do not consider people who live in the township as outsiders, even if they disagree with me. I do not do that. I consider the residents of Wilmot my constituents, and that's the comment that I made. The majority of the constituents, which I believe is true, didn't agree with the decision, and that's all I made. That's the only comment I made. I didn't say that it was wrong or whatever. I said I was disappointed in the decision of council. That was my statement to the reporter. And that I said that it's disappointing that council would allow it out because the majority of the people who spoke out against the process or in favor of the motion that you were talking about were outsiders. And that was the view of myself and several other people who spoke to me. So I will never say that I think that people who live within the township would be considered outsiders because they disagree with me or anybody
That
else.
last sentence that you just said is exactly what I was hoping, I was asking you for. That's what I'm not trying to set you up. In the opposite.
I made the statement. The people who live in this community are never considered outsiders by me, regardless of their opinion. They are my neighbors. They are my constituents, our constituents, who elected us, and to make the decisions on their behalf. And that's it. And I've never said that anybody who disagrees with myself or a decision of council would be considered an outsider because they don't agree with us. I know that we go through life and we're not going to please everybody, and not everybody is going to stand up and cheer for every decision we make or boo every decision we make. I know that is life. That's the way we go through life, not just as counselors, but as human beings. Any comment you make or statement you make, you may or may not please everybody.
In concluding my thoughts, we now have to decide. We've hired an expert as our integrity commissioner to advise us to bring forward findings. And now we have to decide how to address these findings. And I don't think it's an easy question for any of us sitting here.
Thank you, Councillor Fenning. Councillor Gerber, you have comments or questions?
Yes, thank you, Chair Gordick. Mr. Armstrong, or Mayor Armstrong, appreciate your clarification. My perception was never that your statement was a geographic statement, not a metaphorical outsider statement. So I appreciate Councillor Fenning giving you an opportunity to sort of to clarify that for all of us. I think that is I think that is helpful. And we're dealing with a code of conduct that some people find the elements of the code of conduct problematic, and therefore a good amount, it's hard to give a percentage, but a good amount of the concern about the decision we have to make tonight deals with concerns about a document that our council adopts and our council lives by. Generally, our stance here in Wilmot is, we sort of uphold the rule of law. We tend to follow the procedures and the processes that we have set in place. The idea of how we express ourselves outside of council about decisions that council makes, I mean, the best comparison I can come up to is it's sort of akin to cabinet solidarity. I mean, it's not a perfect comparison because cabinet debates are in camera and you don't ever really know, but then cabinet comes out and sort of, and I think there's even a way, to disagree. I would probably suggest that given everything that Mayor Armstrong said after the meeting, if he'd have just added a sentence saying, and having heard all these different opinions, I look forward to, as we move the process forward and go through the consultation process and having Wilmot come out better the other side. I think a statement like that at the end helps explain and put into context. Now, he didn't make that statement, but I think I'm saying that there, people are worried that the code of conduct doesn't allow us to ever go outside of a council meeting and disagree or speak our mind. I think it does. And I just think there's ways to do it. So I'm left with, again, the unfortunate conclusion that if not the letter of the code of conduct, the spirit of the code of conduct, was indeed violated by Mayor Armstrong's comments, kept as they were. Again, I know I think his heart, he was nodding as I was sort of talking about moving the township forward and the healing that we hope will come through that. I think that's all of our common goals. I mean, tonight is such a great council meeting. I mean, we talked about moving our brand forward. We talked about our common ground, our cherished community, our balanced rhythms. We had worked our way through a budget process in a very tumultuous and unprecedented time. We heard the report about moving the township forward as an inclusive municipality. But none of that's going to be talked about tomorrow. All that's going to be talked about tomorrow is this one decision that we're making right now. And that is unfortunate, but it is also the hand we're dealt, and it maybe not be exactly what we signed up for, but it's where we are. Now, in this particular case, I think what's different here than the last code of conduct violation that Mr. Williams reported to us on is that I believe anyway, the way I see it, that the offended party is more, well, it's us, it's the fellow councillors. It's not an affront to a group within the township. We might say, well, the process is important and therefore we speak for all people in the township. Yes, we do. But I can say individually, especially in this case, as one of the councillors who voted to put the statue into storage, that while again there is a violation of the spirit of the code of conduct, my offense doesn't rise to the level of requiring anything near the sanction that's sort of recommended in the article. If we want to start the conversation moving towards what we might actually pass tonight, I would be willing to start that discussion around accepting the report, along with a sanction of 1 day's pay to acknowledge that that the spirit of the code of conduct was violated. But I mean, as one of the councillors who voted against the mayor on this particular issue, I don't feel a higher sanction is required. I think in this case, the harm, if you will, is internal. And again, I think that we do hire experts. The Integrity Commissioner as an independent office exists so that these complaints just aren't filed and we as councillors just decide by a vote of 3-2 that we didn't like what you said. The opinion of this outside expert, even if you disagree with that opinion, is an important part of the process. And again, keeping in mind that it's the code of conduct we're dealing with, we can't just decide we don't like the code of conduct. In a similar way, we couldn't decide that, well, that 8-meter setback for a front porch is ridiculous. We're going to let this person put their porch 6 meters from the road. I mean, we do have to play the regulatory hand that we're dealt. So as a conversation starter here, I would move to accept the report with a sanction of 1 day's pay, and that's only probably because it's a second offense, and we did say after the first one that there would be a possible escalation. So I think we need to maybe show some fidelity to that as well. But again, as an individual councillor who voted against the mayor, I did not take offense to what he said.
Thank you, Councillor Gerber. Mr. Armstrong, Mayor Armstrong, is there anything you'd like to say to Mr. Gerber, or you're okay? Ms. Milholtz, go ahead.
Sorry, thank you through you, Chair Gordick. So what we have done now is there is a motion on the floor from Councillor Gerber, correct, for 1 day pay. I have prepared a motion as I did last time for council to consider at one point. So if there is a seconder, we will record that.
Can we, but Mr. Fisher, Councillor Fisher and Councillor Fanning would like to speak, so could we?
Actually, if I may also,
yep.
Now that we have actually gotten into discussion about pay, Mayor Armstrong has declared a pecuniary conflict of interest. I just wanted to remind council of that.
Thank you very much for the reminder. Thank you. Councillor Fisher, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair Gordick. I'm going to agree with Councillor Gerber on this one. I think it's important to respect the recommendations of the Integrity Commissioner. It's important to continue on with what his recommendations are. Have some consistency, I think, is important. And I think the code of conduct is meant to keep us in check regarding our behavior. And but if the code of conduct was to examine each of us, I'm sure we'd be guilty of one time or another. Wilmot's been through a lot over the last 9 months, and I think it's maybe time to show a bit of kindness to each other. A law is a law, and Dr. Williams has recommended that he did breach the law and has given us the option to go up to 30 days pay. So I think by going with what Councillor Gerber suggested with 1 day docking of pay, tells people that yes, he did breach the code of conduct, and we realize that. And I think it's might be the way to go, in my opinion.
Thank you, Councillor Fisher. Councillor Fenning, you had another comment?
Through you, Chair Gordon. I just, one thing Councillor Gerber said that the only offense is internal to the rest of council. And while I agree with how you frame that, I don't think that it is entirely true, because it goes again to the process of arriving at democratically decided positions or discussions. And when we impugn the decisions that are arrived at and the motives of those who made the decisions, we destroy trust in our democratic institutions. And I think that that is something that we all need to work really hard on upholding and protecting. And I think that the comments and we've discussed them, I think, sufficiently, but I think that these comments do in fact impugn the process, not just us as councillors.
Councillor Gerber?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, through you, Chair Gordick, and I know I think Ms. Middleholst has had her hand up, so I think maybe you may want to call on her next. I just want to acknowledge, yes, Councillor Fenning. I think a more accurate statement would be the harm is, according to the code of conduct, is primarily, but not solely ours. So I'm not trying to say that it was. And I sort of tried to qualify that, I think, when I said it. The harm here isn't solely to those of us who voted the way that we did, but I understand the general as well, which is why, again, I think why I'm able to say that the spirit of the law, if not the letter of the law, that those comments did sort of did violate that kinship of cabinet solidarity that we share.
Thank you, and my apologies, Ms. Middleholtz, I didn't see your hand till the last minute, so please go ahead.
That's quite all right, Chair Gordick. I just need to have a confirmation from Councillor Fisher that he was actually seconding the motion. Thank you.
Are there any other comments or questions from anyone? Okay, I just have a small one, and it's sort of already been discussed with regards to what Councillor Gerber and Councillor Fenning said, but I just wanted to sort of just reiterate a little bit that with regarding to the outsiders, at least one of the non-Wilmot residents who advocated for their removal of the SJAM statute until we have a further conduct the consultation is an Indigenous educator at the University of Waterloo. I thought that she offered insight and a perspective that was valuable, especially because she's an expert on Indigenous issues. Here on council, we listen to the opinions from experts who don't live in Wilmot. For example, tonight's branding company, Obby and Mug, who don't live in Wilmot, and just this evening. So, and we accepted their expert opinion. I believe some of our staff members are also experts in their field, and not all of them live in Wilmot, but we still listen to their valued opinions when it comes to presenting reports and recommendations to put to council. So how our decisions will affect local residents of the utmost importance, and we can reach those decisions by listening to compelling arguments from a whole variety of voices on both sides of the issues. We don't ban non-residents from speaking as delegations because we know that their opinions are valuable. Sometimes we agree with them and sometimes we don't, but we can also just benefit from listening to them. So that's my comment, because I feel that with Councillor Gerber and Councillor Fenning, as well as Councillor Fisher, that there was a disrespect shown to fellow council members with the whole decision-making process. As Dr. Williams has already mentioned, if Mayor Armstrong had just stated that he didn't disagree, but he had to respect the decision of council, we wouldn't be in this particular situation. And there was plenty of that discussion that happened that evening within council. So I am with Councillor Fisher and Councillor Gerber that we accept the recommendation and that we do a, sorry, go ahead. Go ahead, Ms. Middleholtz.
Sorry, through you, Chair Gordick, I'd just like to call to council's attention that we do have a delegation in the attendee spot who has his hand up and would like to address council again. So generally speaking, Chair Gordick, this is not something that occurs very often. It is at the call of the chair to hear delegations who wish to address council again. This person did not use up their 10 minutes, so technically it's not as though that has been breached, but it is the decision of the chair. Please advise if you wish to have that person heard.
All open to the democratic process, so please go ahead.
They've left the meeting.
Thank you, Carl, for that. I did not realize they had. So yeah, I was looking, I didn't see any hands up, so I did not realize that anybody had. So Ms. Middleholtz, you had another comment?
No, I didn't have any other comments. I just, he did have his hand up. I'm trying to find a spot to bring that up, but now we're
sorry.
past. It's okay.
You. Any other comments? So go ahead. Councilor Gerber, sorry.
Okay, thank you, Chair Gordick. Yeah, I would just want to echo Councillor Fisher's comments about kindness and grace. And I know in polarizing issues like this, we will get people who believe that we didn't go near far enough. We will get people who believe that this shouldn't have been a violation at all. And we certainly hear all that feedback and understand and respect all that feedback. But my take on accepting the report and coming up with the recommendation that we have tonight is to help us move forward and to help us move through this. It's not to give a blank check to any future Integrity Commissioner reports. I mean, it's quite possible we could reject Integrity Commissioner reports. However, as I stated, I believe that this was a violation of the spirit of our code of conduct when it comes to that cabinet solidarity and what you say outside of council. So I grant that. So it's just, but we won't always, it doesn't necessarily mean that we're just blindly following any expert advice. We do carefully consider all these particular decisions for those who may be concerned about that. And I'm hoping that it's seen as a step towards kindness, grace, respect, and that moving forward we're able to focus on those things that bind us together, like the branding exercise we went through tonight, like the the awesome budget that we passed tonight, like the work program that we're going to see in the next quarter, moving towards being a more inclusive township. I mean, one of the other things that I really appreciated about the branding presentation tonight was just being reminded again of all those things that we sometimes take for granted here and how blessed we are to be residents here and to have a process like we do and to have people who care like we do, and bringing that all together in a common direction takes a lot of work. But I know a lot of us are putting that work in and are willing to do so. So I just wanted to sort of share my thought process for tonight. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Gerber. Ms. Middleholtz, as you can see, has put up a motion for us to look at. I unfortunately can't see any participants, so if I'm ignoring somebody, if somebody could let me know, but if not, we have a motion brought forward by Councillor Gerber, and if everybody would take a look at it, and Ms. Middleholtz, would you like to read it, please?
Sorry, my controls kind of move around when I share my screen through you, Chair Gordick. That the remuneration paid to the mayor in respect of his services as a member of Wilmot Township Council be suspended for a period of 1 day. So I will stop sharing now so you can see the rest of council.
Thank you very much. So as suggested, that this is a motion brought forward by Councillor Gerber, correct? And a seconder with Councillor Fisher. All in favor? That motion has carried. So I believe that ends my duties as chair for this evening. So Ms. Middleholtz, if you can follow through on procedure and take over, and Mayor Armstrong can take his seat back. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Gordick. Okay. So the next item is the accepting the correspondence, and that the recommendation that correspondence item number 12.1 be received for information. Moved by Councillor Fisher and Councillor Fenning. All in favor? Thank you. That's carried. Next is the bylaws. The recommendation that bylaw numbers 2021-05 and 2021-06 be introduced, ready first, second, and third time, and finally passed in open council. That is moved by Councillor Gordick, Councillor Fenning. All in favor? That is carried. Are there any notice of motions? Seeing none. Any announcements? Just have to check and see what order we go in here. I did that. I'm having a problem with that. Okay, Councillor Gordick, you're first on the list.
I think I'm following up on Miss Murray, but I believe you missed a bylaw just because I think it kept turning the page over. So just before we get to notice of motions and announcements, just sort of, so thanks.
You're absolutely correct. So keep your hands up, folks. We'll go back to that. The recommendation that bylaw number 2020-32 be ready third time and finally passed in open council. That is moved by Councillor Gordick, second by Councillor Fisher. All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. And now we're on to announcements. And who's first? Councillor Gerber, you're first.
Thank you, Mayor Armstrong. Just wanted to further maybe just build on something I'd mentioned earlier. It was great that we were able to acknowledge Black History Month both at our budget meeting and tonight at the beginning of council. And I'm looking forward to future Black History Months when we will have more direct input from members of our Indigenous, Black, and Peoples of Color community to even better celebrate and honor the importance of this particular month and the diversity of the township.
Thank you. Councillor Fisher next. Sorry, yes. Councillor Fisher.
Thank you, Mayor Armstrong. First off, I'd like to thank Councillor Gordick for a great job being chair. I know it's a little stressful at times, but you did a good job. So, secondly, as a member of the Heritage Wilmot Advisory Committee, I'd like to share that Heritage Week is coming up shortly with the kickoff date of February 15th. Unlike other provinces who celebrate the third Monday in February as Heritage Day, we in Ontario celebrate the entire week. So that's February 15th to the 21st. For over 30 years, Heritage Wilmot has been hosting annual Heritage Day events celebrating heritage in Wilmot Township and the region of Waterloo. Last year, we celebrated with the theme of places of worship and welcomed hundreds of people to the New Dundee Community Centre, one of the best attended events that we had. It was a great time to connect with heritage property owners, local heritage groups, long-standing and new places of worship in Wilmot, as well as all levels of government and residents that come out to support the event. Although Heritage Wilmot is unable to host the event this year, they are working with Castle Kilbride staff to share lots of great information during Heritage Week. I invite you to follow Castle Kilbride's Facebook page at Castle Kilbride for daily posts that will highlight photos and facts about the community, as well as efforts of Heritage Wilmot. You will also see lots of great articles published locally coming out shortly too. Until then, to learn more about Heritage Day and Heritage Committee, please visit the website at www.heritagewilmot.ca.
Thank you, Councillor Fisher. Councillor Fanning.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Armstrong. I am also privileged to be on that committee for Heritage Wilmot, and I want to say that it's a lot of fun to be on. So, you know, if you haven't ever thought about being on a committee, some of our members will literally keep you in stitches for the entire committee meeting. It's a wonderful group and very passionate about the history and heritage of our community. And I look forward to celebrating virtually with everyone. Black History Month is especially important to me. Every year, a number of Jamaican workers come to my farm, and they bring with them, as we like to say, the Jamaican sun. They share laughter and a lot of hard work, and they are an incredibly important part of my life and this community. And they've been part of Canadian life for many years. 53 years since the first Jamaicans came to Canada on that program. And that's part of Black history in Ontario. I want to say a really, I don't even know how to put it into words. Tri-County Mennonite Homes has done an incredible job taking care of our seniors. All of the staff are incredibly dedicated, loving, and it shows. And I want to say, if you know anyone, or maybe if you do work there, I'm saying thank you to you. My mother-in-law lives there. And we went to tour a variety of homes. And that was the only home that we had on our list, literally. Because the warmth and love that is shown in those halls, in those rooms, is evident. I had the privilege to spend some time with my mother-in-law today, and it was very emotional. The only thing that has allowed me to feel okay, somewhat COVID fine, that's a thing, right? Is knowing just how much all the staff there care about the residents and are working hard to protect them. And it is really shown in the results. So thank you. Thank you again.
Thank you, Councillor Fenning, and thank you for giving a shout out to the folks at NIFU, because they certainly deserve that. You're absolutely right there that they are a great group of people. So thank you. Councillor Hallman.
Thank you. I wish I could wrap my hands and arms around Councillor Fenning and give her a big hug. I can't imagine what it's like to go that long without seeing a loved one so deeply connected. So I'm so glad you had that experience today. Oops, I'm hitting buttons on my computer by accident. Sorry, everybody. Just having a technical day. My first announcement, Black History Month continues, and many members of our community have started down the path of further understanding the discrimination that people of color face here in Wilmot and in our country. Most of us are worried we'll handle it wrong, say the wrong thing, do the wrong thing, and as a result, we simply don't talk about race. But don't be colorblind, be color brave, and learn about the barriers to equality that people of color have faced and continue to. Take some time to learn about some of the amazing contributions that people of color have made while we learn to celebrate Black History Month. The other thing I wanted to comment on this evening was the Waterloo region lost a rock star on Wednesday, an amazing feminist, Jennifer Campbell. One of my favorite things that she shared was Black Lives Matter, love is love, science is real, feminism is for everyone, no human is legal, and kindness is everything. Which leads me to a local business in New Dundee. So Rustic Candles has made a candle in her honor, and they're selling it on their website, and the funds will be going to causes near and dear to Jennifer and her family. So please consider checking out So Rustic and supporting them and honoring Ms. Campbell for all of the amazing things and her leadership for what is just and what is right for Waterloo region.
Thank you. No further announcements. So the next is the confirmatory bylaw. The recommendation that bylaw number 2021-07 to confirm the proceedings of council at its meeting held on February the 8th, 2021 be introduced, ready first, second, and third time, and finally passed in open council. That is moved by Councillor Fenning, Councillor Gordick. All in favor? That is carried. Next is recommendation that we do now adjourn to meet again at the call of the mayor. Moved by Councillor Gerber, Councillor Fenning, Councillor Gordick, sorry. And all in favor? That is carried. Thank you and have a good evening, everyone. Be safe, be healthy.